that our president put the initiative of making a ceasefire for Easter celebration, but Russia refused. So negotiations are going on. As soon as negotiations teams are meeting, the attacks are growing. So that's, well, Ukraine is interested. We want the peace, but we don't want to surrender.
Thank you for listening to the interview. For more compelling conversations, you can search for The Interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts. Until next time, it's bye for now.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. How about that dust out there, that wind? It is wild how windy it was out there last night across the province. We're going to get some update on the numbers just shortly here on just how windy it was. And we're going to talk about the dust actually later in the show and this thing called dirty rain that we had. We're going to hear all about that. But first, let's say hello to the crew helping put together today's show. Abby Adiemi is our studio technician, keeping an eye on your weather. Sierra Sanders is our studio director, and she's keeping an eye on your commute. And Darren Morash is our YouTube producer, keeping an eye on your YouTube. As well with us this morning is Heather Wells with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the cousin of a 39-year-old Riverton homicide victim is in shock, but relieved his search is over. Mike Clausen searched day in and day out for Darrell Lambert after he disappeared almost 2 months ago. Clausen says Lambert disappeared days after his mother died of cancer. RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton this week, and now a 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. Well, you talked about the wind, Corey, and we may have been windblown in Winnipeg, but in Deloraine, it was wild. 119-kilometer-an-hour wind gusts yesterday. Minto was next at 113, and Brandon bracing against 106-kilometer-an-hour winds. Just incredible. The winds warning continues for parts of southwest Manitoba and the western part of the Red River Valley. So you want to batten down the hatches again today. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Also, a lot of other weather to keep an eye out for. There is a yellow freezing rain warning in effect for Thompson right now. And as well, the winter storm warning is still in effect for much of northern Manitoba. We're talking about Brochet to Dooley Lake, Churchill, and York. You could see as much as 10 to 15 centimeters of snow by the end of this morning. Stay tuned. We are going to talk about dirty rain, what that is. We're also getting an update on the very shaky ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. That's all coming up here on Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. We'll be back after World Report. Stay tuned.
On cue. Tracy Chapman went from being pretty unknown in the 80s to basically everyone in the world knowing her song Fast Car. She'll talk about her career and how busking prepared her to play in front of 90,000 people at the free Nelson Mandela concert in 1988.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to announce an industrial carbon pricing deal with the Alberta government today. It's seen as a major step towards building a new pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast. The news comes just one day after Carney unveiled a new national energy strategy focused on a clean energy future. But the move is not sitting well with Stephen Thomas, the clean energy manager with the Suzuki Foundation.
It is deeply cynical to announce some good news on electricity on one day, while planning to announce bad news on dismantling climate policies and advancing new pipelines the very next day.
Carney says any pipeline project would depend on the completion of the pathway's carbon capture. However, many critics argue that carbon capture technology is unproven and too expensive. U.S. President Donald Trump is heading home after his summit with China's Xi Jinping. A band plays as the U.S. president climbed the steps of Air Force One this morning. Trump is hailing his state visit a success, and President Xi says relations with the U.S. are stabilizing. However, it's not clear how much progress was made on key differences. Emily Sue has the latest from Hong Kong.
Following yesterday's warm exchanges, Friday's meeting of superpowers began with a rare tour of the Zhongnanhai complex. It's a former imperial garden that houses the walled-off offices of Chinese leaders. President Donald Trump asks whether other leaders are ever brought here. Very few, replies Xi Jinping. For example, Putin. In their talks today, the Chinese leader hailed what he called a milestone visit and said the two sides had reached understanding on cooperative outcomes. The two countries have agreed to keep trade ties stable and to continue communicating with one another. The U.S. also says China agrees on the need to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. But it was unclear just how concrete other results were. In a televised interview earlier, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said China would invest billions of dollars in soybeans and other agricultural goods. Trump also said Beijing would buy 200 Boeing planes. But details remain thin, and there was little mention of what Beijing wanted in return. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says U.S. policy on Taiwan had not changed. For Beijing, it's a red line. It regards the self-governing island as its territory and warns Washington against supplying it with arms. A U.S. shipment of weapons is pending and could quickly undo any progress made in Beijing. Emily Sue for CBC News, Hong Kong.
The United States, meanwhile, is offering to help Cuba with its economic and energy crisis if Havana meets certain conditions. CIA Director John Ratcliffe visited the island yesterday to meet with his counterpart and deliver a personal message from President Donald Trump. Willie Lowry is in our Washington bureau. Willie, what is Ratcliffe's visit all about?
This was really the latest effort by the Trump administration to increase pressure on the Cuban government. As you said, John, CIA Director John Ratcliffe met with his counterpart as well as with Raul Rodriguez Castro, the grandson of former President Raul Castro. His message, the administration is willing to engage on economic and security issues only if the Cuban government is willing to fundamentally change. President Donald Trump has openly mused about possible regime change in the island nation. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the current Cuban government was unable to help its people.
The current model they have is broken. It doesn't work and never change as long as the people that are there now are running it. They are closed-minded, unfortunately.
Cuba's energy infrastructure is in tatters. It received most of its oil from Venezuela, which dried up following the U.S. capture of President Nicolas Maduro. And the U.S. has placed a blockade around the country, leading to rolling blackouts lasting nearly the whole day.
So the head of the CIA meeting with Castro. At the same time, though, Willie, reports the U.S. is preparing to criminally indict a former Cuban president, another Castro. What's that all about?
That's right. U.S. media is reporting that the Department of Justice is preparing an indictment against Raul Castro, the 94-year-old brother of Fidel, who led Cuba from 2008 to 2018. The indictment is expected to center on the downing of two planes in 1996 belonging to the humanitarian organization Brothers to the Rescue. Castro, while retired, John, still holds significant sway in Cuba.
CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure.
The death toll now stands at 24 in Kyiv as the city marks a day of mourning. Rescue workers have finished clearing the rubble of a 9-story apartment building where a Russian cruise missile killed 3 children. They just wanted to live, but the Russians killed them, says this woman who lives across the street and witnessed the attack. Flags are flying at half-mast across the capital today as the city cancels all entertainment events to honor the dead. Manitoba is fighting a persistent outbreak of hepatitis A. Infections continue to spread more than a year after the outbreak was first declared. There have been more than 600 cases and 3 people have died. Health officials are raising the alarm while First Nations leaders are calling for more help. Karen Pauls has the story.
They're nauseous, they're vomiting, they may be having diarrhea.
Dr. Kieran Ginger is regularly treating cases of hepatitis A at Winnipeg's inner city teaching hospital.
Some people may be experiencing liver failure, bleeding issues. Of course, liver failure can lead to multi-organ failure.
The infectious liver disease is spreading among vulnerable populations, including people experiencing homelessness, people who share needles, and crowded households.
Most of our homes don't have running water. They don't have plumbing.
Alex McDougall is a Grand Chief who represents 4 northern Manitoba communities which have declared states of emergency because of an outbreak there.
There was one recent that passed, another one from Sagamak, a young boy, a 5-year-old.
The province has expanded eligibility for free hepatitis A vaccines to people 6 months and older. Indigenous Services Canada is supporting community-wide vaccination clinics. But Dr. Carol Kurbis, Manitoba's Medical Officer of Health and Communicable Diseases, says Hep A is hard to control.
You can be contagious for up to 2 weeks before symptoms develop and up to a week afterwards. So you can be spreading the virus before you're even aware that you're sick.
Back at the hospital, Dr. Ginger thinks the province should declare a public health emergency like it did for HIV last week.
My concern is that people are going to die.
Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Worsening traffic in southern Ontario has some municipal leaders looking to reroute onto the water. Expanding marine shipping on the Great Lakes could reduce the amount of freight on our roads. The CBC's Jeffrey Tram explains.
More trucks, more congestion, and more pressure on highways across southern Ontario. That's part of the reason leaders from Canadian and U.S. cities bordering the Great Lakes recently met in Hamilton. The goal to convince companies to instead move goods across the water. Jonathan Altenberg is CEO of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative.
We have less than 50% of the capacity that can be handled by the St. Lawrence River.
But will it actually help take trucks off the road?
The short answer is yes, that's true.
Elkafi Hassini is a professor at McMaster University's School of Business. He says marine shipping can reduce both costs and emissions.
Typical vessel could take up to 100 hundreds, I would say, of full truckloads.
But Hassini says there's a major issue.
We don't have the infrastructure to handle that additional freight.
Ian Borsuk is executive director of Environment Hamilton. He says while truck traffic has worsened pollution, increased shipping traffic could also bring environmental risks.
This is where our drinking water comes from.
He says any expansion on the lakes must include strong environmental protections. But with congestion growing across the region, pressure is building to finding alternatives to trucking. Jeffrey Tram, CBC News, Hamilton.
And finally.
Yeah. Ice.
Toronto skyline turned an icy blue this morning to celebrate the release of Drake's new album, Iceman. The CN Tower lit up to look like a block of ice as the rapper dropped the project along with 2 new surprise albums. Drake has sold 170 million albums in his career, making him one of the most successful artists in history.
BTS, 'cause it took the whole career for me to be so discovered.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
These days I see an older couple. I see my only uncle looking like that I ain't owning up to.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. It is Friday, May 15th, 2026, and no, it is not 1930, because it felt like that out there yesterday. It was a dust bowl out there, wasn't it? That wind, that dirty rain. We're actually going to learn about what dirty rain is. It's very rare, but it happened yesterday. And we're going to also hear very shortly just ahead about which place in Manitoba was the most windy yesterday. And also coming up this hour on the show, for many Canadians, the workday doesn't end at 5 o'clock. It continues at home, providing healthcare for loved ones. Coming up, new research shows pressure is mounting on a growing number of households in that situation. We're also going to get the latest on peace negotiations between Israel and Lebanon and a shaky ceasefire that comes close to expiring. That's all coming up here on Information Radio. But up first, at 6:11, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, the family of a 39-year-old Riverton man who was missing for months and is now a homicide victim are in shock. Daryl Lambert disappeared almost 2 months ago. His cousin, Mike Clausen, led the search for Lambert. RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton this week. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. The RM in Gimli is being asked to prevent all-terrain vehicles from threatening the lives of scores of garter snakes. An online petition signed by more than 600 people wants permanent barriers to be set up around a den on land owned by the municipality. Hundreds, if not thousands, of snakes emerge every spring to mate and feed before returning in the fall, and there have been many that have been found squished under the wheels of ATVs. And talk about getting blown around. Yesterday, people in Deloraine felt wind clocked at 119-kilometer-an-hour wind gusts. That was the strongest wind. Those wind warnings continue today, not for Winnipeg, but Deloraine certainly felt the brunt of it. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 6:30.
Deloraine, more like Delo Wind.
See,
this is why they only let me host on Fridays.
You know what? It was crazy, right? The whole thing yesterday with the wind and the dirty rain.
It really was something. We had soccer yesterday for my 3-year-old, but we didn't get the email that it was canceled.
Yeah.
So we showed up, and there was like 6 other families there who also didn't get the email, and we still made a time of it. But by the end of it, like, it was windy and there was all that dust blowing around. We all had like a layer of dust on it, my kids included, and like with all their boogery faces all covered in dust.
Oh, yeah, I know. You know, my daughter, the same story. She took her son to a soccer game, and it wasn't canceled. They did play, but she says at the end she went home, and she says she looked like a chimney sweep.
Yeah, exactly. It was wild out there. Wild. Well, thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Abby Adeyemi, and you know what? It's not just the wind story down here up north. There's also freezing rain and winter storm warnings. Lots going on.
Yeah, a lot still going on. Major spring system still causing messy conditions across the province. Hence, we still have warnings which remains in effect for southwest Manitoba, the western part of the Red River Valley region, stretching into Randon, Pudgel Prairie, Morden, Winkler, all the way towards Verdun. We're still expecting this westerly gust to be hitting like 90 kilometers. If you look at most of the regions in the south yesterday, like Dauphin, Verdun, towards Morris, we saw the wind speed between 90 and 98 kilometers. And here in Winnipeg, it peaked around 87 kilometers, and Port La Prairie saw about 83 kilometers of wind speed. So it's still going to be a bit windy in some parts of the south today. Hence, we still have warnings. While the warnings has ended for Winnipeg and the Steinbach area, driving can still be, you will notice it if you're driving. It might want to toss you here and there. Up north, Thompson, Gillam, Shamattawa, we're still dealing with this freezing rain warning as ice builds up on roads and even power lines. So you should expect up to 2 to 5 millimeters of ice before the rain actually switches over to snow later tonight. So be prepared for that. That's according to Environment Canada. For the city right now, we're sitting near 16 degrees both at the airports and at the Forks under mostly cloudy skies. The warmth from yesterday eased overnight. Now we have this cold front moving through. It's going to bring more like a cooler and fresher air into the city, with the winds coming from the west, still gusting between 50 and 70 this morning. And the dust conditions are gradually improving. We'll see highs expected to reach 20 today, which is more like closer or better still around the seasonal values for this time of the year. But for Winnipeg right now, we are going to be staying around 16 degrees for now, and then we get to 20 later.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. And Sierra Sanders is in Look at the Commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. Not too much going on right now as we kick off this Friday show. Haven't received any calls on the commuter line. So things at this time are moving pretty smoothly, but just want to remind folks about a pretty big construction zone, I would say. It's probably been mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. The Marion construction zone from Archibald to Panet. It's one lane each direction only. And that's until August 10th, and that's due to some street construction there. So you want to expect delays there and maybe use a different route just to make sure, or to ease your stress a little bit, because that is quite a big construction zone, especially as it goes down to 1 lane from 3. But the number to call today, if there is something getting in your way or there's a situation that you want to let me know about, that number to call is 204-788-3093.
And speaking of all that construction that Sierra was mentioning, we've had a lot of calls about construction this week. We're actually going to have someone from the city of Winnipeg joining us after 7 o'clock to talk about the big projects going on and what kind of delays you can expect as construction season starts this year and what it'll look like throughout this summer. So it's coming up after 7 o'clock. But right now, though, you may have noticed that layer of dirt left on your car or umbrella after the rain yesterday, and that's the grime left behind by a rare weather phenomenon called dirty rain or muddy rain. So what is it exactly, and why does it happen? So to find out, CBC's Chloe Friesen spoke with Alex Crawford, a climatologist and an assistant professor at the Department of Environment and Geography at the University of Manitoba.
So what is dirty rain?
Well, if you look back at the yellow warnings that we had, you might start to see some of the hints. It's when there's dust and there's rain in combination. And the rain and the dust are mixing together. That might be in the cloud itself. It might be as the raindrops are falling down and kind of intercept that dust on the way down. And then that splashes on your car, on your house, on anything else, any other surface that might be outside. And when that rain eventually evaporates, it's going to leave behind that dust.
So why did we see it happen today? This is a rather rare happening.
Yeah, it's not like every rainstorm you have in May is going to produce dirty rain. So why does it happen? There's 2 main ingredients that we need besides dust in the air. One is you need to have a pretty strong storm to help churn up that dust. So going back to those yellow warnings, when you're getting winds up at 70 kilometers per hour, gusts up to 90 kilometers per hour, that can stir up a lot of local dust in Winnipeg. But in this particular case, that's probably not the main culprit for the dust. If you look south of the border, the entire Western United States has been in a drought for a while now. And in particular, if you look in Wyoming, eastern Wyoming, western Nebraska, they are churning up a lot of dust there. And the storm we had coming through was so big that it was able to funnel some of that dust cloud all the way up here to Winnipeg. So there's a little bit of extra compared to what you normally would see.
So some of the dust on my car today is from Wyoming?
Potentially. I mean, I can't tell you every single grain of dust exactly where it came from, but yes, you can get dust that'll come all the way up that far. Yeah.
So what about high winds and topsoil in the air caused by farmers who are seeding right now? I've heard that as a theory. Is that accurate?
So yeah, there are definitely local sources of dust as well. Winnipeg has not been especially wet or especially dry lately, but you think about the pollen in the air, the agricultural activity we have going on, there are definitely some local sources too. It's just that when you have such a big storm like this, it can tap into a lot more than just what is in Manitoba.
There's actually an app out there that tracks wind and even how much dust is in the air. I know this is an app you use, but can you tell us more about Windy?
Yeah, so there's a few different apps out there that are weather apps. One of the ones I look at for daily weather and lots of people look at is called Windy. And there's a desktop version you can use too if you prefer a web browser on the computer. And there's lots of different things that you can see from satellites, from weather forecast models that can tell you everything from the temperature, the wind direction, the particulates in the atmosphere like dust, or also things like just other sorts of pollution like sulfates in the atmosphere, that sort of thing.
I was looking at the desktop version earlier today and seeing the wind patterns coming up from the south and tracking the direction. Yeah, straight from Wyoming to Winnipeg. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And this isn't every day. The storm we have is definitely strong. I was looking up some numbers a little earlier, and the pressure of the storm, which is something climatologists use to describe how strong they are, is at about 981 hectopascals. Lower is stronger in this case. And that's lower than 90% of all of the storms that get within anywhere nearby Winnipeg in May. So it's definitely one of the stronger ones we get.
Is dirty rain anything to worry about?
I mean, not from a long-term health perspective. It's no more dangerous than if you have dust in the atmosphere normally. So you think about the visibility, or you think about people with asthma or other respiratory issues. The dust that's in the atmosphere can be problematic for them, but it's going to be problematic for them with or without the rainfall. So I think that the biggest thing is that it's a nuisance.
That's Alex Crawford. He's a climatologist and assistant professor at the Department of Environment and Geography at the University of Manitoba. He was speaking with CBC's Chloe Friesen. Well, 6:21 right now here on Information Radio. Right now in Winnipeg at the Forks, we are sitting at 16 already, heading for a high today of 20. Brandon, right now you are sitting at 14, heading for a high of 18 today. Dauphin, you're at 9. Your high today will be about 13. Expect some rain as well today. And Thompson, you're at -2, and you're going to stay at about -2 today for most of the day, with some snow and freezing rain. Well, next up here on the show, Israeli and Lebanese officials are back in Washington for another round of peace negotiations as a tense ceasefire situation is set to expire on Sunday. But a key party in that conflict, the Iranian-backed militia group Hezbollah, still isn't participating in talks. For a closer look at this story, we've reached James Devine. He's an associate professor of politics and international relations at Mount Allison University. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So how has the ceasefire between the two countries gone so far?
Well, it's been a very rocky process. The ceasefire was initially intended to limit Israeli military operations, mostly limit them to defensive operations and limit them to operations south of the Litani River. To an extent that's happened, but Israel has interpreted defensive operations very broadly, and it's basically setting up a buffer zone south of the Litani River, or between the Litani River and the Israeli-Lebanese border, destroying villages, destroying lots of homes. By most recent estimates, 10,000 homes have been destroyed or badly damaged since the ceasefire was put in place. 380 people have been killed. There's more than 1 million Lebanese civilians who have been displaced by the conflict. And in the past few days, direct attacks between Hezbollah and the Israeli Defense Forces have been escalating, and the situation is becoming increasingly unstable.
So then what is the Lebanese government looking to get out of these negotiations, and how much leverage does it even have?
Well, the ceasefire is supposed to, that's in place now, is supposed to be come to an end on Monday. I think the Lebanese government's primary goal is going to be to extend that ceasefire for a few more weeks or perhaps a month. In a perfect world, they would get the Israelis to withdraw their military from the southern part of the country, and they would be able to take control over Hezbollah so that they can control what that militia is doing. But I don't think either of those things are realistic. I think the best they can hope for is the ceasefire. Their leverage in the situation is actually really quite limited, because Hezbollah is a militia, is a complicated institution. It's part of militia and it's part of political institution. The militia side of it is out of the control of the Lebanese government. So the Lebanese government can't stop Hezbollah from attacking Israel. It can't promise the Israelis anything in terms of Hezbollah's behavior going forward. So there's really not much they can do in the situation, or in a lot of ways they're on the sidelines.
And what's Israel's end goal here?
Well, in general, Israel would like to see Hezbollah disarmed and the Lebanese government send its military in to take control over the southern part of the country. So that would provide stability on Israel's northern border and put an end to Hezbollah attacks into Israel. I think realistically, Israel understands that that's not going to happen. The Lebanese military is in no position to take on Hezbollah and try and disarm it. So what they're looking at now really is setting up this buffer zone wherein Hezbollah doesn't have any real position in southern Lebanon to attack into northern Israel. That seems to be the process they're going for right now.
So is it kind of going to be like the Golan Heights sort of situation in southern Lebanon there going forward, do you think, where it's this sort of permanently contested area?
It could possibly be. I think the buffer zone may not be a permanent solution for the Israelis, but a solution for the foreseeable future. To the extent that people have been making comparisons, what they're looking at is not the Golan Heights, but Gaza right now, where Israel has also set up what it refers to as a yellow zone, wherein any movement which it says is offensive or threatening, they can use military force against. So they're seem to be trying to set up the same situation along the northern border.
Now, Washington is serving as a mediator. So how does that work when the U.S. is in its own stalemate with Iran?
Well, the two conflicts are very closely tied together. Hezbollah started to attack Israel after the war between Israel and Iran broke out, and they were doing this basically to provide some support for the Iranians and put pressure on the Israelis. So the two conflicts are actually part of the same larger regional war. The United States has wanted to try and get the situation in Lebanon under control because Iran has made that one of its primary demands in the conflict, that the fighting in Lebanon and the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon come to an end. So the U.S. was the ones who basically initiated the ceasefire, forcing the Israelis to at least restrict some of their military activity, if not stop it completely. So they're kind of the drivers in the ceasefire process. What we need to look for is what the U.S. is going to do going forward, because the negotiations with Iran have not been productive. There was some hope that the U.S. trip to China, and Donald Trump is just coming back from China right now as we speak, would give them some sort of diplomatic leverage with Iran, and that doesn't seem to be the case. So if the U.S. is running out of patience with the diplomatic process and decides it needs to go back to military force, their support for the ceasefire may begin to wane. They may actually see more military activity in Lebanon as a way of putting pressure on Iran.
So, and how much influence does Washington even have over Israel when it comes to forcing compliance with that ceasefire or pulling out of Lebanon altogether?
It's limited. It's a very subtle relationship between the two. Washington can put diplomatic pressure on Israel by criticizing it in public, telling it, if Washington tells Israel to do something directly, Israel will usually do it. But they're very careful about how much pressure they put on the Israelis because they don't want to undermine the relationship. Part of it is also the U.S. has leverage in terms of the weapons that it provides Israel with. But at the same time, too, the United States looks at Israel as a major strategic ally in the region, which it doesn't want to alienate. And there's also a lot of domestic politics involved in this. So the U.S.'s leverage over Israel, it's there, but it's limited. It's not like the U.S. can dictate to Israel what it's going to do and when it's going to do it. And the Israelis have their own security concerns and their own agenda.
So finally here, James, what are you expecting from this round of talks then?
Well, I expect that they will renew the ceasefire because it sort of suits the Lebanese government's purposes. As I said, it's not a great ceasefire, but it's better than the alternative. And the Israelis will probably be willing to go along with it because it's something that keeps the Americans happy, and it really isn't restricting their operations to a large extent. I think the question is going to be what happens with the American disposition on the conflict and whether they want to continue to support a ceasefire, and also what's happening on the ground. Because as I said earlier, the the direct clashes between Hezbollah and the IDF have been getting increasingly intense, and there were more of them this morning. It could get to the point where those clashes become so serious that whatever they've negotiated in Washington really is besides the point.
Well, James, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
James Devine is an associate professor of politics and international relations at Mount Allison University. Well, still to come here on your business report, there's new evidence that big tech is turning to well-known children's brands to help deflect scrutiny over kids' screen time. We're going to get the details on that after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's a breezy 16 degrees. The wind warning for Winnipeg has ended, but we will still see gusts from the southwest this morning up to 80 kilometers an hour. That wind switches direction this afternoon from the northwest, keeping us cool, a high today of 20. The cousin of a 39-year-old Riverton homicide victim is in shock, but relieved his search is over. Mike Clausen searched day in and day out for Daryl Lambert after he disappeared almost 2 months ago. Clausen was consumed in his efforts to find his missing cousin.
There's been many days where I was out there by myself or with a couple people and just tried to look in out in the marsh and the lake and snowmobile trails and anywhere we could look or would think he may be or got caught in a situation in snow and got stuck somewhere.
Clausen says Lambert disappeared days after his mother died of cancer. He says his cousin was an electrician and regularly helped people fix electronics. RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton this week. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. Clausen believes Lambert and the suspect were acquaintances. Well, how windy was it? People in Deloraine felt 119-kilometer-an-hour wind gusts yesterday. Minto was next at 113, and Brandon was bracing against a 106-kilometer-an-hour wind. Here in Winnipeg, the wind may have felt strong, but the highest gust clocked at a mere 87 kilometers an hour. The wind warning, as I mentioned, has now ended for Winnipeg, but it continues for southwest Manitoba and the western Red River Valley, with gusts up to 90 expected today. Weather warnings also continue for the north, places like Thompson, Nelson House, Split Lake, Gillam, and Shamattawa. Freezing rain expected there. And a winter storm warning for Churchill, Brochet, Tadouli Lake, and York, with heavy snow forecast today. The pizza's hot at Tommy's Pizzeria on Corridon, but the patio's not. A cool start to spring means a slow start to outdoor dining season. Owner Tommy Schneider says their patio season typically gets going around the end of April, but this year's weather has kept many diners eating indoors, and this first long weekend of the season has cooler temperatures, even some rain in the forecast.
We rely on our patio season in Winnipeg. It's very short. Our winters are really long, and our business gets cut in half or even worse. So we really rely on our summer to retain enough money to get through the winter.
Schneider says bad weather can also impact how many shifts he has available for his staff. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to announce an industrial carbon pricing deal with Alberta today. It is seen as a major step towards building a new pipeline to the BC coast. The news comes just 1 day after Carney unveiled a new national energy strategy focused on a clean energy future. But the move isn't sitting well with Stephen Thomas, Clean Energy Minister with the Suzuki Foundation.
It is deeply cynical to announce some good news on electricity on one day, while planning to announce bad news on dismantling climate policies and advancing new pipelines the very next day.
Carney says any pipeline project would depend on the completion of the Pathways carbon capture project. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A library in Steinbach hopes provincial community safety funding can help them improve security. Aubrey Walker is the director of the Jake Epp Library. She says the library's written 72 incident reports between January 2025 and April of this year. Some included violence and weapons or drugs and alcohol. 26 of the incidents happened this March.
Many libraries are finding themselves in positions of doing jobs that aren't really in the realm of what they've been trained for, hired for, or are often being paid for as a front circulation clerk. They don't have security training, they don't have mental health crisis training.
Walker says short-term solutions like locking bathrooms and checking bags have worked. Now the library is looking for longer-term remedies like security cameras. Walker says the library has a meeting with City Council where it will request funding for security measures. The RM of Gimli is being asked to prevent all-terrain vehicles from threatening the lives of scores of garter snakes. An online petition signed by more than 600 people wants permanent barriers to be set up around a den on land owned by the municipality. Hundreds, if not thousands, of snakes emerge every spring to mate and feed before returning in the fall. Tammy Scogan lives in the neighboring RM of Armstrong. She says many garter snakes are crushed under the wheels of ATVs, and she worries Gimli's leaders might prioritize motorized recreation over conservation.
I'm a little concerned about how the council's been handling this. Yes, it's great that tourism supports Gimli community, but ecotourism could also equally do that.
Scogan says a simple solution would be to block motorized access to the area by planting trees. The RM says it wants to take, quote, a thoughtful, informed approach that considers ecological protections and community use. You can find more Manitoba news throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Well, you heard Heather there mention those really high winds. The other rain saw as much as 119 kilometers an hour. And Abby, that wind isn't necessarily over yet.
No, it's not over yet, Corey. We're still expecting powerful westerly gusts hitting 90 kilometers today for the Westman, the Parkland region, and even areas in the Pembina Valley this morning into late afternoon. So you're still going to notice that push and the dust being blown around. While the warning is ended for the Winnipeg area, it's still going to be impacting. That spring system is still going to be causing messy conditions for a bunch of regions in Westman region towards the Parkland area this morning. While up north for Thompson, Gillam, Shimarwa, nearby areas, you're still going to be dealing with freezing rain warning as ice builds up on roads and even power lines. So we're looking at about 2 to 5 millimeters of ice before this system is going to be switching over to snow later tonight. While further north towards Churchill, we have a winter storm warning, which is finally winding down this morning after that dumping of about, we're seeing about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow in that part of the province this morning. So whether you're walking or driving, please take it easy. It's going to be pretty slippery as you travel towards the northern parts of the province. But for the Red River Valley region this morning, forecast for Winnipeg and nearby areas features more like a mix of sun and clouds. There's a slim chance of afternoon showers. A high for today around 20 degrees. Currently 16, mostly cloudy outside with just a bit of windy conditions. It's going to increase the gust this afternoon. For the city, we're going to see the high really get to that 20, and then it drops about 4 degrees later today. But for now, we're looking at 16 degrees. Similar conditions we're seeing across the south. The Pembina Valley region, we're looking at 15 degrees there, depending on where you are between Morden and Headingley. Highs would be around 24 with wind gusts. Brandon towards Nipper, we're tracking 13 there. Cloudy skies, a slim chance of showers in the forecast. Highs of 18. Dauphin all the way towards Russell, we're tracking 9 degrees there. Light rain falling there, high of 13. While in the Interlake region, Gimli and nearby, we're looking at about 12 degrees, depending on where you are. A few showers in the forecast, highs of 17. Then we track it from the central into the northern part of the province, where we're noticing this messy freezing rain and snow in the forecast. The power flame from both seeing light rain at this time between 1 and 3 degrees. Temperature falls to -1 this afternoon. Norway House is at 6 degrees. Cloudy conditions. Thompson and Gillam both freezing rain and drizzle there. 0 to -2. You stay around this temperature for most of the day. Lynn Lake is at -6 with light snow. You only get to 0 later, while for the Tudor Lake region and towards Churchill, with these extreme conditions you're experiencing, you see temperatures around -8 to -9 with light snow. You only warm up to about -3 later in the day. So it's still one of those days, Corey, that we just have to deal with a mixed bag of conditions both in the north and in the southern parts of the province. For the city, expect a high of 20. Today we are at 16 right now.
You know, Sierra and I were just chatting. We both have family cottages, and saying how this year usually you'd be like ramping up to make that big opening weekend where the family all descends on the family cottage. But both of us actually this year we're not going because it's just not nice enough.
Maybe just go clean all this dust that is there.
Well, actually, my parents were there yesterday, and actually they found mouse poop. And now with the whole haunted thing, they're like, okay, we're gonna hold off and give it a good clean before we spend any time out there. So
nice one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much, Abby. And Sierra, yes, You're also in with a look at the commute.
Yes, Corey, not too much going on out there so far, so things are moving pretty smoothly on this Friday morning commute, which is good to hear. And if you are heading out to the cottage possibly, or maybe you're braving camping, I don't know.
I'm curious.
I wonder if the tent will blow away. If you're tenting, I hope your tent doesn't blow away. I hope you're really staking it down. Is that the right word to use?
I think you got it right. Peg it down.
Peg it down. I don't really know what the best wording to use would be, but hopefully you survive if you do decide to make your way out to the cottage or camping. I salute you, honestly. But yeah, the commute's looking pretty good. Things are moving smoothly so far. No calls on the commuter line. It's been pretty quiet so far. But if that changes and there is something that has popped up on your drive, give me a call. That number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Well, Crystal Ramlakan is here with the business report, and as we head into the long weekend, many will be looking to fill up their gas tanks. And what kind of prices are people facing?
Well, the price of gas continues to hover near historic highs with no sign of dropping before the travel-heavy summer season winds down this year. So it looks like we'll be facing these kinds of prices for the next couple of months. So regular unleaded gas neared $2 a liter on average across Canada as of yesterday. Of course, climbing over the past week and in line with rising oil prices with the conflict in the Middle East. So the group Canadians for Affordable Energy says eye-watering prices at the pump are likely to persist through most of the year, actually. And the months-long price spike comes just as Canadians were hoping to gear up for spring road trips and summer getaways, with the ripple effect also poised to boost inflation and weigh on economic growth.
Next up here, a robotaxi company is recalling thousands of vehicles. So what's the story behind that?
Yeah, this is Waymo, and it's recalling about 3,800 robo-taxis in the U.S. to fix software issues that could allow them to drive onto flooded roadways. So the autonomous vehicles were recently seen in Austin, Texas, driving onto a flooded street and stalling, requiring other drivers to navigate around them. And similar incidents have occurred in other locations. Now, this is just the latest safety-related issue for the Alphabet-owned unit that has been rapidly bolstering its fleet of vehicles and entering new U.S. markets. And Waymo has also drawn criticism for its vehicles failing to yield to school buses and for its performance during widespread power outages in San Francisco recently, where robo-taxis halted in traffic, causing gridlock. And the company says it's identified an area of improvement and opted to file this voluntary software recall. And the company says it provides over 500,000 trips every week and that safety is its primary priority. Now, Waymo says it has put mitigations in place limiting where it operates during extreme weather. And the company has service in 11 U.S. markets, but its service in San Antonio remains temporarily suspended. And that's because last month, a Waymo vehicle entered a flooded road again and then was actually swept away into a creek. Now, thankfully, no passengers were on board, but yeah, that kicked off a probe by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the U.S. and led to this latest recall.
Also here, there's new evidence that big tech is turning to well-known children's brands to help deflect scrutiny over kids' screen time. So what are the details on that?
Yes, so Meta and Google enlisted trusted children's brands such as Sesame Street, Girl Scouts, and Highlights Magazine to teach kids to use technology in moderation, even as the companies designed apps that made it difficult to unplug. So that's according to Reuters, who reviewed thousands of documents made public through lawsuits and company-sponsored educational videos and lessons. So they reveal Meta's strategy to partner with outside groups to promote positive messages about technology began several years ago as criticism started to spread. So backed by dollars from tech giants, organizations delivered lessons about personal responsibility using colorful magazines, popular characters, and even catchy songs. And the sponsorships are fueling criticism that companies are finding new ways to encourage kids to become dependent on social media. And it also comes as tech giants are facing multiple lawsuits accusing them of designing addictive products. So the companies declined to say what they paid these organizations, but we know in 2024, Google pledged to spend at least $20 million US to support groups that promote digital well-being. But you know what, Corey, this is not anything that's super new, to be honest. Corporations, ranging from things like soda companies to the tobacco industry even, have long made donations to trusted institutions to improve their reputations. Now, Google says it prioritizes the well-being of its youngest users by building industry-leading safeguards. Sesame Workshop says Google had no control over its educational materials. Meta says it had a limited role in designing the Girl Scout materials. And Highlights magazine says it designs products to help kids make thoughtful choices.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Corey.
That is Crystal Lee Ramlakan with your business news. Well, if you were like me yesterday, maybe you're outside watching that big wall of dust make its way towards you, and you may have been telling yourself, keep out of the storm. Well, that's the title of this next song. Here's the Sheepdogs with Keep Out of the Storm here on CBC Radio 1.
It's like I'm trapped in a hell. Ever since I turned 18, like living in a bad, bad dream. Now it's time to draw the line out at the borderline. If you know what I mean, I got to keep out of the storm. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to find another home. How long has this been going on? Feels like I'm under a spell. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to find another home. Long gone now, babe, I can't go on. I know you cannot as well. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the storm. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the storm.
That's the Sheepdogs with Keep keep out of the storm. And speaking of which, there is still a yellow wind warning in effect for much of southern and western Manitoba. That includes Port Prairie, Morden, Brandon, Killarney, Melita, and Verdun. And we just got an email not long ago from that Minto and surrounding area. The power outage means that Minto School is closed today due to a power outage. Minto actually saw the second highest amount of wind in the province yesterday. It saw as high as 113 kilometers an hour. Deloraine saw 119 kilometers an hour, and Brandon saw 106 kilometers an hour. And if you want to let us know how that wind yesterday impacted you, or if you have pictures, maybe it blew down a tree in your yard, anything like that you saw out there, you can email that to us, radio893@cbc.ca. That's radio893@cbc.ca. You can also call us on our listener line if you want to tell us about something you experienced from yesterday's high winds. You can call us 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. Well, next up here on the show, many Canadians are quietly taking on a second unpaid job, that is caring for aging or sick loved ones. And now, as the cost of living continues to rise, pressure is mounting on those households. And that's according to a new report done by the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. To talk about what supports are available and whether workplaces are offering enough flexibility, we're joined by Liv Mendelson. She's Executive Director at the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. Good morning. Hi there, Liv.
Hi, great to be with you.
Good to be with you too. So when we talk about caregiving, so who are we just talking about, and what kinds of responsibilities do they have day to day?
Well, care touches every Canadian family. A quarter of Canadians are caregivers today, and half of Canadian women are. And as you say, they're caring for a loved one, a grandparent with Alzheimer's, a spouse with breast cancer, a sister who's had a stroke, child with autism. It really is touching every family in Canada.
And just paint a picture for us of what, maybe a typical day or typical kind of situation looks like for someone trying to balance that work and personal life and caring for a loved one.
It's tough. It's really hard. Caregivers, in addition to their full-time job, are working an average of 5 hours a day, unpaid as caregivers for a family or friend. And that looks like, being up in the middle of the night with mom with dementia. It looks like waking up early in the morning to get the medication ready, to do wound care, to do bathing or toileting, to get that person ready for the day, to get the meal started. And then at work, chasing down blood tests, chasing down specialists, dropping off at the pharmacy to grab some new meds. And then more when they come home from work. It's really hard to juggle, and we know that caregivers in Canada are not doing well.
And what kind of mental, emotional strain are caregivers carrying right now because of all this?
So almost 80% of caregivers are experiencing those negative impacts of unsupported care. So anxiety, exhaustion, overwhelm. They're feeling it physically. It can be a very physical job, backbreaking work of carrying someone from the bed to the chair. That intimate care work can be really hard. And also in the pocketbook, which I know we're gonna get into. But in Manitoba specifically, almost 90%, 87% of caregivers haven't accessed any caregiver-specific supports in the last year. So caregivers in Manitoba in particular are really white-knuckling it and need better access, better pathways to support.
And how high is that compared to, say, other provinces? Just curious.
It is quite a bit higher. Yeah, it's definitely an outlier. So we need to support the access for caregivers in Manitoba.
And I don't know if you've looked into why it's higher in Manitoba. Is that due to lack of access? Tell us a little bit about that in terms of access.
Some of it's some of it's lack of access. There's also just lack of awareness. Caregivers don't always think of themselves as caregivers. In fact, they usually don't until there's some kind of crisis. You think of yourself as a daughter, a wife, a sister, a parent, and it's only when you're not able to get the support that you need to keep going. And across the country, 20% of caregivers have told us they're not sure how they're going to keep going So to me, that's a real red flag. That's when they start to see, oh, what I'm doing is actually has a name and it's caregiving and I need support for it.
And you mentioned there's a lack of awareness of support. So what supports are there that are available right now?
So the best way for caregivers in Manitoba right now to find support is through those groups that are providing support to illness and disease and disability aging groups like Abilities Manitoba, Inclusion Winnipeg, Alzheimer's Society. Those groups are there and often have great peer supports, but also to talk to your doc, to your primary care practitioner, to your nurse practitioner. Our system is so focused on the patient, and it needs to be, but we need to extend that lens to the caregiver because we know when the caregiver isn't doing well, the health outcomes for the patient are 60% worse.
And is there financial supports as well for caregivers, or?
There are. So Manitoba doesn't yet have a provincial caregiving benefit. The Atlantic provinces and Quebec all do. So that's something to advocate for in the province. But there are some tax credits. There are some benefits for caregivers to look into. There just aren't enough. And we know caregivers are really struggling. 20% of caregivers in our country are spending more than $1,000 a month out of pocket on care expenses, in addition to the affordability crisis that they're managing with rent and mortgage and groceries and all of it.
And, if there's one thing you want employers or anyone struggling with caregiving to better understand, what would that be going forward? Because yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of these people are balancing jobs as well at the same time.
Yeah, the majority are. What I'd say to employers is a third of your workforce are already caregiving. You may not be aware because there's a lot of stigma about talking about what you're carrying at home in the workplace. But if we can break that stigma down, if we can do what a lot of leading Canadian companies are doing, which is set up employee resource groups, peer support for caregivers, helping caregivers better understand their employee benefits around caregiving. And this is the one we hear from caregivers the most. Give that flexibility so that if you need to work from the hospital bedside one day, or you need to flex your hours so that you're working in the evening so you can take your kid with autism to a therapy appointment, make that possible for people so they can keep going, they can keep contributing. Caregivers make excellent employees. All the things they learn about system navigation through the care experience, they bring to the job as well.
And finally here, what should the government's top priority be on this issue of caregiving?
So this government committed in their election platform to put in place a national caregiving strategy. We worked with caregivers and care providers and policymakers across the country to create that blueprint. So now we're just asking government. 35,000 Canadians have already called their MPs to say, let's get this moving. Let's put the national caregiving strategy into place. Let's get support out to people.
Well, Liv, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Liv Mendelson is the Executive Director at the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. Time now is 6:58 here on Information Radio, and still to come, it is construction season, so we're going to speak with the City of Winnipeg about the big projects going on and what kind of delays you can expect because of it. That's coming up after 7 o'clock. And right now, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, the cousin of a 39-year-old Riverton homicide victim is in shock, but relieved his search is over. Mike Clausen searched day in and day out for Daryl Lambert after he disappeared almost 2 months ago. This week, RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. And it is May-long weekend, but the slow start to spring is being felt on Winnipeg patios. We'll hear from some restaurateurs coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Quiet commute so far. If you see anything, though, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. And still to come, also this next hour on the show, we were talking about that dust and that wind and that dirty rain. Southern Manitoba experienced blowing dust and winds, and we're going to be speaking to CBC's weather specialist Riley Laychuk about how that all happens and what impact that's had on the province. That's coming up this next hour on Information Radio. Stay tuned.
Current.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Dr. Alika Lafontaine is known as an innovator in healthcare, but now something else has caught his attention.
When we go through those emotions and relive those experiences over and over again, it's almost like we're living them again.
Dr. Lafontaine about what happens when the growing sense of anger in a polarized world turns to outrage. Coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to announce an industrial carbon pricing deal with the Alberta government today. It's seen as a major step toward building a new pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast. The news comes just one day after Carney unveiled a new national energy strategy focused on a clean energy future. But the move is not sitting well with Stephen Thomas, Clean Energy Manager with the Suzuki Foundation.
It is deeply cynical to announce some good news on electricity on one day, while planning to announce bad news on dismantling climate policies and advancing new pipelines the very next day.
Carney has said any new pipeline project would depend on the completion of the Pathways carbon capture initiative. However, many critics argue that carbon capture technology is unproven and too expensive. Canada's largest white nationalist group is coordinating with fascist fight clubs in the United States. A CBC News investigation has learned that Second Sons Canada met with the founder of the global what's called the Active Club movement during a trip to Texas. Experts warn these groups pose a serious threat to public safety. Christian Poslang has this exclusive report from CBC's Visual Investigations Unit.
When I first saw that picture, I laughed because despite the blurring, I knew it was Rondeau right away.
Journalist Michael Colborne has been following Robert Rondeau for years, and he says there's no doubt it's Rondeau, the founder of the global white supremacist Active Club movement, in a blurred photo with two members of Second Sons Canada, a major white nationalist group in this country. Second Sons members traveled to the U.S. in late March, meeting there with several other fascist fight clubs that train in combat sports. But a CBC visual investigation also finds that, while in Texas, the Canadian group met with Rondeau, who was sentenced to 2 years in prison for rioting at political events. They also participated in a South Carolina combat sports tournament and event organized by Patriot Front, a notorious American white nationalist group.
I think it's very significant that we're seeing Canadians travel across the border.
Stephen Ray, a digital research manager with the think tank Institute for Strategic Dialogue, says this kind of travel is becoming more organized, and the involvement of Canadian groups is a sign that the movement is global.
This shows that this problem of white supremacy is not isolated to Canada alone, and that the white supremacist groups in Canada are not operating within geographical silos.
Second Sons Canada has grown rapidly since 2024, with chapters across the country. Christian Poslang, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can find the visual investigation team's full report on our website, cbc.ca/news. Before heading home, Donald Trump took a private tour of Beijing's Imperial Gardens at the end of his state visit to China.
These are the most beautiful roses anyone's ever seen. I asked the president, could you get me some for the rose garden? And he said, yes. I've never seen roses so big.
Both the U.S. president and China's Xi Jinping are calling their summit a success, but political observers suggest the trip was more about pageantry than policy. The CBC's Chris Brown has more.
As Donald Trump jetted back to the United States on Air Force One, he hyped an incredible visit.
We've made some fantastic trade deals, great for both countries.
President Xi Jinping, however, made no mention of anything specific the two leaders agreed to. So far, we've established a new relationship between our two countries, he said, a constructive and strategic relationship. With top U.S. CEOs traveling with Trump and major issues to deal with, including microchip exports to China, financial markets have reacted poorly to the lack of any post-visit announcements.
We did discuss Iran. We feel very similar to Iran. We want that to end.
If Xi plans to try to help Trump end the war in the Persian Gulf that the U.S. president started, he gave no indication of it. Instead, a Chinese statement said the conflict should never have happened and has no reason to continue. Earlier, China issued a similarly sharply worded statement on Taiwan. It warned the U.S. that mishandling the status of the democratic island could put the bilateral relationship in peril. If Xi's goal was to project the image of a responsible, growing superpower, this summit may have helped him achieve that. Trump also emphasized stability, but it's unclear if the deeply contentious issues between the two countries are any closer to being resolved. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Meanwhile, the United States is offering to help Cuba with its economic and energy crisis if Havana meets certain conditions. CIA Director John Ratcliffe visited the island yesterday to meet with his counterpart and deliver a personal message from President Donald Trump. Willie Lowry is in our Washington bureau. Willie, let's talk about this. What is Ratcliffe's visit all about?
This was really the latest effort by the Trump administration to increase pressure on the Cuban government. As you said, John, CIA Director John Ratcliffe met with his counterpart as well as with Raul Rodriguez Castro, the grandson of former President Raul Castro. His message, the administration is willing to engage on economic and security issues only if the Cuban government is willing to fundamentally change. President Donald Trump has openly mused about possible regime change in the island nation. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the current Cuban government was unable to help its people.
The current model they have is broken. It doesn't work and never change as long as the people that are there now are running it. They are closed-minded, unfortunately.
Cuba's energy infrastructure is in tatters. It received most of its oil from Venezuela, which dried up following the U.S. capture of President Nicolas Maduro. And the U.S. has placed a blockade around the country, leading to rolling blackouts lasting nearly the whole day.
So the head of the CIA meeting with Castro. At the same time, though, Willie, reports the U.S. is preparing to criminally indict a former Cuban president, another Castro. What's that all about?
That's right. U.S. media is reporting that the Department of Justice is preparing an indictment against Raul Castro, the 94-year-old brother of Fidel, who led Cuba from 2008 to 2018. The indictment is expected to center on the downing of two planes in 1996 belonging to the humanitarian organization Brothers to the Rescue. Castro, while retired, John, still holds significant sway in Cuba.
CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure.
The death toll now stands at 24 in Kyiv as the city marks a day of mourning. Rescue workers have finished clearing the rubble of a 9-story apartment building where a Russian cruise missile killed 3 children. They just wanted to live, but the Russians killed them, says this woman who lives across the street and witnessed the attack. She says the victims were ordinary people who were wiped out in an instant. Flags fly at half-mast across the capital today as the city cancels all entertainment events to honor the dead. Worsening traffic in southern Ontario has some municipal leaders looking to reroute onto the water. Expanding marine shipping on the Great Lakes could reduce the amount of freight on our roads, but experts warn of environmental and infrastructure concerns. CBC's Jeffrey Tram reports.
More trucks, more congestion, and more pressure on highways across southern Ontario. That's part of the reason leaders from Canadian and U.S. cities bordering the Great Lakes recently met in Hamilton. The goal to convince companies to instead move goods across the water. Jonathan Altenberg is CEO of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative.
We have less than 50% of the capacity that can be handled by the St. Lawrence River.
But will it actually help take trucks off the road?
The short answer is yes, that's true.
Elkafi Hassini is a professor at McMaster University's School of Business. He says marine shipping can reduce both costs and emissions.
Typical vessel could take up to hundreds, I would say, of full truckloads.
But Hassini says there's a major issue.
We don't have the infrastructure to handle that additional freight.
Ian Borsuk is executive director of Environment Hamilton. He says while truck traffic has worsened pollution, increased shipping traffic could also bring environmental risks.
This is where our drinking water comes from.
He says any expansion on the lakes must include strong environmental protections. But with congestion growing across the region, pressure is building to finding alternatives to trucking. Jeffrey Tram, CBC News, Hamilton.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you ever miss World Report, or you want your friends to know about World Report, remember we have a podcast. You can follow us and tell those friends, and then everybody's in on the club. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Boy, oh boy, it was windy yesterday, and it still is windy out there. There's a yellow wind warning actually in effect for much of southern and western Manitoba this morning, and still a winter storm warning in effect up north. We're going to get the details on that coming up. But right now, this hour on the show, a new study shows that over 80% of Canadian youth feel stressed or anxious about the future of their career. Pair that with the highest youth unemployment rate since 1994, and you got to wonder, are the kids all right? Well, that conversation coming up in our Young and the Jobless series. Also, can the video game Fortnite help teach an Indigenous language? Later on the show, we might be able to answer that question. Stay tuned for that. But up first, we're to catch up with the city of Winnipeg about the 2026 construction season. And that conversation coming up just ahead. But right now, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba Hydro crews are dealing with dozens of power outages across the southern part of Manitoba because of last night, and continuing today, the wind and dust storm. It says downed power lines and broken trees have been reported in the Parkland and Westman regions, the largest area in the southwest corner, including Minto, where, as you've been telling us, Corey, school has been canceled. Winnipeg has a number of smaller power outages dotted across the city. Hydro says at this point, it's not known when power will be back on to any of these locations. And how windy was it? Well, in Deloraine, people felt 119 kilometer an hour wind gusts. Minto, 113, Brandon, 106, and in Winnipeg, 87. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Yeah, I hadn't seen a wind like that even just yesterday in the wind. It was only 87 here in Winnipeg.
It felt stronger.
It felt strong. I think it was because that dust too. You could feel it on your face. It kind of felt like you're getting pelted a little bit.
Yeah, it really did. And then as we were talking, that dirty rain, a colleague of mine went out just across the street around noon to get coffee and came back, and the little white plastic lid of the coffee was all dotted with brown spots. What's happening?
It's gritty coffee. Gross. Thank you very much, Heather. That is Heather Wells at your CBC News desk, and Abby Adeyemi joins us now with a look at your quite varying weather conditions across the province.
Yeah, we're still waking up to two very different weather stories this Friday morning. The south, we're seeing some cooling down after the significant wind and dust events, while the northern part of the province still remains under active winter storm warnings with snow and freezing rain in the forecast. Hence, Environment Canada still continues to issue this wind warning across much of the regions and even into southern Manitoba this morning, including the Pembina Valley region, the Westman region, and the Parkland region, after peak gusts exceeded 100 kilometers in parts of the regions yesterday. Now, the winds are still gusting between 50 to 90 kilometers in exposed areas this morning. Some dust storm warnings eased, but localized blowing dust still remains a concern in rural travel, so look out for that. While further north, we still see winter storm and freezing rain in effect across the Thompson Churchill area, where we saw 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, ice accumulation, and even poor visibility are kind of ongoing right now. Conditions in the Red River Valley region, Winnipeg and nearby areas, temperatures sitting around 16 degrees at this time. Mostly cloudy outside, though the intense warmth from yesterday's dust has kind of eased for the city. Now it's more like replaced by cooler northwest winds, and this will just gust up to about 70 kilometers today. Today we'll see a mix of sun and clouds with about 30% chance of showers this afternoon, and then we get to a high of 20 degrees later today. So that's the story across the city right now. Across the southern regions, we're looking at 9 to 16 degrees as cool air settles in, and of course a cooler weekend pattern settles in also. But right now, Winnipeg, we're just around 16 degrees.
Thank you very much, Abby. And if you have pictures for us, if you want to tell us about the wind and how it impacted you yesterday, you can email us. We'd love to see some pictures. That's radio893 at cbc.ca. That's radio893 at cbc.ca. You'll get it up on our CBC YouTube page. Or if you just want to tell us about it, you can also call our listener line, 204-788-3009. 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. Almost to the commuter line, which is your job, Sierra.
Trying to take my job.
I'm sorry, I got excited.
You just got again. You can take the director out of the director chair, but you can't take the director out of the director.
It's true.
It's true. It's true.
So tell us about the commute so far. Anyone
I
call?
mean, there's not much to tell you about, actually. The commuter line's been pretty quiet so far. I haven't heard about any major situations or any major backups happening here in Winnipeg or in the surrounding areas. But if that does change and there is something that gets in your way or there's something you want to let me know about, I'd love to hear about it. You can give me a call. That number is 204-788-3205. Oh my goodness, 3093.
Well, that commuter line's been quiet today, but all week we have been getting lots of calls about construction. We call it Winnipeg's unofficial fifth season. I'm talking about construction season. Last week, the City of Winnipeg announced the 2026 major construction projects. Around $157 million has been budgeted for a local and regional street improvement. And Andrew Condon is the manager of engineering with the City of Winnipeg, and he joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Corey. Thanks for having me.
So what are some of the big projects kicking off this year?
Yeah, so we have a robust program of street renewals, sidewalk replacements, and active transportation projects throughout the city. But some of the notable ones that drivers will see around the city is the Lagimodiere Twin Overpass project. This project's been going on for a few months, but we're going to see roadwork start up soon. We also have a number of projects down as part of our downtown streets renewal on Edmonton and St. Mary's. We're in year 2 of our Pembina Overpass project, and then drivers can also anticipate some work happening on St. Mary's around Fermor, closer to the floodway, as well as a few projects out on Wilkes and Plessis.
And how do the number of projects compare to last year?
Yeah, so we have about 175 lane kilometers of road construction happening this year, which represents over 200 locations. It's consistent with the last couple of years.
And what kind of big backups might these be? You mentioned some of those the projects. Like what do you think is going to be the most disruptive to traffic? Do you think, based on the ones that you told us about?
Yeah, thanks. Of course, anytime we have lane closures on major regional streets, there's always the likelihood of some delays happening. So some of the key ones that we can likely anticipate here are going to be associated with the Lage Overpass project. Of course, having a lane dropped on Lagimodiere is always going to be challenging. However, that lane's been down for some time and traffic's been moving okay there. But we can also expect some delays with the Pembina Overpass project at Abinogi-Michana, as well as with a few other of our regional streets previously noted on St. Mary's, McPhillips, Plessis, and Wilkes.
And that big one on Lagimodiere, how long is that expected to last for?
Yeah, so we're on year 1 of a 2-year project. So the overall scope of that project is bridge rehabilitation, but included with that is pavement renewals from Rendiers to Grassy. So we're in the first year, which is largely tackling the southbound lanes, and year 2 next year will be the northbound lanes.
Okay. And, I think maybe a lot of Winnipeggers, they'll see the cones, they'll maybe only kind of see the disruptions, maybe that temporary disruption is causing. But, why are these larger projects important to Winnipeg's infrastructure, right now?
Yeah, we need to make sure that we're getting in there and doing roadworks at the right time. Make sure that we extend the life of these roads as long as we can. When we get in there and do roadworks early, then we can extend the life and reduce costs to taxpayers. It's also an opportunity for us to improve rides and tackle some other projects that are important to the city, like closing gaps in AT network and making improvements to the overall vehicle network.
Andrew, thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Andrew Condon is the manager of engineering with the City of Winnipeg. And for road construction information, including lane closures on major streets and an interactive map of construction projects, you can visit winnipeg.ca/services-programs. We actually use that a lot here on the show, actually, when people give us a call to ask us about things. So you can also call Sierra to ask her. She's good at it. 204-788-3093. Is the commuter line as well. Well, 7:20 right now, and as we've been talking about throughout the show, wind and dust whipped through Manitoba last night, and for many, the city appeared almost orange. It sort of looked like the movie Dune, where there's this planet covered in sand. Well, coming up, we're going to hear why parts of Manitoba looked out of this world from CBC's weather specialist, Riley Lachuk. I know I felt that way yesterday when I was at the soccer field with my kiddo, the game was actually canceled, but a few of us parents didn't get the notice. We all showed up. We saw this big wall of dust coming our way, wondering, oh my gosh, what's happening? So we luckily made it home before it got too windy, but quite the weather up there. And you can send us pictures of anything that you saw yesterday, how that wind impacted you. Send those pictures our way, radio893@cbc.ca. Well, next up here on the show, singer-songwriter Kat Clyde hails from southwestern Ontario, and this next track is from her latest album, Mud, Blood, Bone. Kat Clyde now with new music, Hold My Hand, right here on CBC Radio 1.
Sit outside where the sun sits wide, dark in spirals, looping stride. I can't find a place I wanna hide beside you. Come on in my kitchen, let the kettle run. Moon, she's got me crying. Moon, she's got me wrong. Out on pavement, no more road ride. Maybe I could feel better if I had you on my side. And if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Yeah, if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Let's find a soft hard rock by a running river, shed all our clothes, let the water make us shiver, sink in, sink out. Come on and show me what you know that I've never seen. And if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Yeah, if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Wanna move with love in the buoyant salty ether. Let the vibration hum, strike desire's hungry fever. Let it all go and surrender. Release all control. Pick a number, choose a card, and let the dice fall. And if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Yeah, if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Oh, if you hold my hand, I think you could understand. Hold my hand.
That's Kat Clyde from Northwestern Ontario with Hold My Hand. And you can catch her at the Winnipeg Folk Fest this summer. Well, stay tuned here. Still coming up here on Information Radio, we're going to hear how a Manitoba-made video game is turning language learning into a quest, and it's using the incredibly popular Fortnite platform. CBC's Jim Agapito found how, and that is coming up after 7:30. But right now, though, Scott Roguer joins us with your morning sports. Hey there, Scott.
Hey, Corey.
So let's start on the ice and the drama-filled opening game of the Walter Cup final.
Yeah, that drama really ramped up, Corey, in the final minute of regulation time. Ottawa with a 1-goal lead, looking like they were going to head towards victory. But then Montreal pulled its goalie, and Marie-Philippe Poulin showed us yet again why she's nicknamed Captain Clutch. Poulin urgently collected a puck from the sideboards and threw it in front of the Ottawa net, where Nicole Gosling jammed it in to tie up things. And then just a few minutes into overtime,
these two teams, overtime history in the playoffs. Clarity in front, and they score! Montreal steals game 1 at home.
Abby Rock with what was a pretty crazy winning goal. A Montreal shot from the point deflected up and hit Rock in the face mask. Good thing she was wearing a face mask. And ricocheted into the net. Rock was interviewed about that.
Honestly, I was lucky enough it hits off my face and goes in.
You already have one black eye in these playoffs. You didn't have the mask, you'd have another one. But that would be a pretty good black eye to have, wouldn't it, in overtime going?
For sure, I would take that any day.
Yeah, all very dramatic. The Victoire, Corey, will look to go up 2-0 tomorrow.
And they actually won't be the only Montreal team playing a high-stakes game on Saturday.
Right. The Habs, they'll be in a position to book a place in the Eastern Final tomorrow. This after they thumped the Sabres in Buffalo last night. For a while, it looked like Montreal might be the thumpee, not the thumper. Canadiens netminder Jakub Dobeš gave up 3 goals on the first 4 shots he faced. Now, usually a coach would remove his goalie under such circumstances, but Martin St. Louis decided to get a second opinion first.
I feel like the goalie position is probably the one position that I can't help much. So I try to stay out of it, right? And not be emotionally driven and being upset that we're down. Like the first period was chaotic on both sides. Trevor radioed up top to our goalie coach, Marco, and he made the call. It was a very quick call, too. He said, no, keep him in. Okay, let's move on.
St. Louis referencing assistant coach Trevor Letowski, who called up to goalie coach Marco Marciano, who said to him, keep Dobeš in, which was a great call. The Czech keeper, who has been Montreal's top performer in the playoffs, shut the door from there, stopping the next 32 shots he faced. Sometimes patience, Corey, and believing in your players and fellow coaches pays off, as does scoring 6 times on the other team's goalie, which is something the Habs did as well. So another performance like that tomorrow, and Montreal will face Carolina in the next round for a chance to play in the Stanley Cup final.
All right. Well, moving over to soccer now, where with the World Cup less than a month away, there's plenty of news surrounding Canada's players.
Yeah, including a huge match tomorrow for Alistair Johnson. Canada's likely right back at the World Cup will play for his club Celtic. And a win over Hearts will see Celtic win yet another Scottish Premiership title. Celtic and their fierce Glaswegian rivals Rangers have accounted for every league title over the past 40 years. Meanwhile, some concerning news, Corey, around Alphonso Davies. German media outlet Bild reports that although Bayern Munich, his club, must release Davies for national team duty for the World Cup, behind the scenes the club wants him to take the summer off to make a complete recovery from his leg injuries. Given Bayern signed Davies to an extension worth around $200 million and the fact he's been hurt before playing with Canada, you can see where Bayern's coming from here. And you can read more on that story this morning on our website. And before I leave the pitch,
What broke you once made you strong.
that is the official FIFA World Cup theme song, Die Die, by Shakira and Nigerian singer-songwriter Burna Boy. They will perform it during the first ever World Cup final halftime show in New Jersey come July 19th. And one more, I won't say footy note. If you tune in to CBC Radio 1 on Monday, Corey, you'll hear See Thee Rise, Canada's World Cup. It's an hour-long special on the tournament I've put together, which will look at all aspects of what will be the biggest sporting event, not just Canada, but the planet has ever seen. That will air, I'm not sure what time it airs on. It's Monday afternoon. Check your local listings.
Great. And you know what? Also, fun fact, Manitoba's own William Prince said on his Facebook page he's going to be part of the opening ceremony. So excited to see that.
Amazing. All right. Look forward to it.
Looking forward to it, too. Thank you very much, Scott.
You betcha.
That is Scott Regehr with your morning sports. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Time now for your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. Well, gone is that day of dirty rain. Today, just a slight chance of showers. Still some wind, though. And the wind is again going to be the story as it comes at us from the southwest with gusts to 80 this morning, but then it switches directions and it's going to cool us down as it comes from the northwest, a high today of 20. Well, southern Manitoba was hit with a powerful blast of wind yesterday. People in Deloraine felt 119 kilometer an hour wind gusts. Minto had 113, and Brandon bracing against 106 kilometer an hour winds. Here in Winnipeg, the wind may have felt strong, but the highest gust was a mere 87 kilometers an hour. The wind warning has now ended for Winnipeg, but it does continue for southwest Manitoba and the western Red River Valley with gusts up to 90 kilometers an hour. Weather warnings also continue for the north, freezing rain in the Thompson region and a winter storm warning around Churchill with heavy snow forecast today. Now, Manitoba hydro crews are dealing with dozens of power outages across the southern part of the province because of the wind and dust yesterday. Hydro says there are downed power lines and broken trees in the Parkland and Westman regions. The largest area is in the southwest corner, including Minto, where school is closed as a result of the outage. In a social media post, Hydro says crews are working to get power restored, but they had to pause work last night because it wasn't safe. They will be back out this morning. Now, in Brandon, that wind was so strong it blew over the Esso sign on Highway 1 at 18th Street. And within Winnipeg, there are now a smaller number of power outages dotted across the city. Manitoba Hydro says at this point it isn't known when power will be back. It's already May long weekend, but the slow start to spring is being felt on the patio. At Promenade Brassiere, the spring-summer menu is being rolled out. That's Brasserie. The owner, Jay Lucapoy, is still waiting on some warmer temperatures to get people out on the patio. He says he's been trying to open his patio for the last 4 weeks, but the weather is not cooperating.
Snow greeting me, and the last couple of weeks it's kind of, okay, we'll clean it off again and get the dust gone, and yeah, it's been a bit of an uphill battle.
He says patio season leads to a bump in business and the ability to offer more shifts to staff, but May-long's weekend forecast shows cooler temperatures and some rain. Well, the family of a 39-year-old Riverton man who was missing for months and is now a homicide victim are in shock. Daryl Lambert disappeared almost 2 months ago. His cousin, Mike Clausen, led the search for Lambert.
It's totally consumed my life, day in and day out, searching and not sleeping and everything. So it's, in one way, it's kind of a weird thing to say. It's nice to have the closure, but it's so we can move forward with the next steps, but it's absolutely devastating.
Clausen says Lambert disappeared days after his mother died of cancer. He says his cousin was an electrician and regularly helped people fix electronics. RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton this week. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. Clausen believes Lambert and the suspect were acquaintances. A library in Steinbach hopes provincial community safety funding can help it improve security. Aubrey Walker is the director of the Jake Epp Library. She says the library has written 72 incident reports between January 2025 and April of this year. Some included violence and weapons or drugs and alcohol. 26 of those incidents happened this March.
Many libraries are finding themselves in positions of doing jobs that aren't really in the realm of what they've been trained for, hired for, or are often being paid for as a front circulation clerk. They don't have security training, they don't have mental health crisis training.
Walker says short-term solutions like locking bathrooms and checking bags have worked. Now the library is looking for longer-term remedies like security cameras. Walker says the library has a meeting with City Council where it will request funding for security measures. Donald Trump took a private tour of Beijing's Imperial Gardens at the end of his state visit to China.
These are the most beautiful roses anyone's ever seen. I asked the president, could you get me some for the rose garden? And he said, yes. I've never seen roses so big.
Both the U.S. president and China's Xi Jinping are calling their summit a success, but political observers suggest it was more about pageantry than policy. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The RM of Gimli is being urged to protect scores of garter snakes from being crushed under the wheels of all-terrain vehicles. An online petition signed by more than 600 people asks for permanent barriers to be set up around a den of land owned by the municipality. Potentially thousands of snakes emerge from the den every spring to mate and feed before returning again in the fall. Tammy Scogan lives in the neighboring RM of Armstrong. She says area trails are popular with dirt bikers and ATVers.
It's very obvious that most of them are run over or stepped on. It's not predation and it's not age. We have been going there for years and flicking the dead snakes off of the trail. So we've been sadly doing that for years, and it's very hard to watch when you love nature.
Scogan says a simple solution would be to block the area off by planting trees. The RM says it wants to, quote, take a thoughtful, informed approach that considers ecological protections and community use. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Abby Adeyemi, what's going on with the weather?
Well, two different weather stories we've got this Friday morning. Environment Canada still continues to issue wind warnings and dust storm warnings across parts of southern Manitoba, which includes the Pembina Valley region, some areas in the Westman region, and some areas in the Parkland region also getting that. This covers a bunch of areas where this strong gusts of winds are still reducing visibility in some of the open areas. While further north, we still have winter storm warnings in effect for the Thompson area and towards Churchill. We're noticing freezing rain and, of course, some snow, about 10 to 15 centimeters or so. For the Red River Valley at this time, we're seeing temperatures around 16 degrees under mostly cloudy condition. You will notice cooler northwest flow. The winds are still kind of strong, gusting between 50 to 70, but conditions are slowly improving. Today, we're going to reach a high of 20 under a mix of sun and clouds and a slight chance of showers in the forecast. Similar conditions we're seeing across the southern regions. Temperatures sits between 9 and 16 degrees, while up north still dealing with much harsher conditions. We're looking at 2 degrees around the Power Flame Flown with light rain there, cooling through the day. Norway House around 6 degrees. Temperatures will be dropping as the rain begins to turn into snow, while for Thompson and the Gillam area, we're seeing temperatures between 0 and -2 with freezing rain and, of course, some drizzle under active winter storm warning. But overall, still that sharp divide this Friday morning. The south is windy but improving after yesterday's system, while up north, we're still seeing the active systems there. Winnipeg, we're around 16 degrees right now, Curry.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That is Abby Adeyemi. Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
Not too much. I mean, I feel like your weather is more eventful than the commute today, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been pretty quiet on the commuter line. I did get a call about the North Perimeter, though, just at the Brookside overpass. There's a very slow-moving train there that is big and slow. That was described to me by a couple of callers. So something to keep in mind there. And it seems to be backed up in both directions, so heading north and heading south there. So the North Perimeter at Brookside there, things are moving a bit slower because of a big and slow train. So I think that's the only thing to keep an eye out for there on your drive. But other than that, things are looking pretty good here in Winnipeg and those other areas. But if that changes and there is something you want to let me know about, give me a call. That number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Well, as we were all well aware of yesterday, if you were in southern Manitoba, Environment Canada issued 2 yellow warnings for southern Manitoba last night. One was for winds ranging from 70 to as high as 100 kilometers, and another for reduced visibility because of blowing dust. And earlier in the day, many also experienced a strange, dirty rain. That is the technical term. And to tell us more about what's happening, CBC's weather specialist Riley Lachuk joins us now. Hello there.
Good morning.
So why is this weird weather happening kind of all at once right now?
All right. So all of this is the result of a large area of low pressure that pushed across Saskatchewan, now into Manitoba now. It's centered sort of over Barons River, Poplar River on the northeastern corner of Lake Winnipeg. That is the result of the wind here in the south that didn't actually carry a lot of moisture with it, but there was a front that came through that pulled in all of this dust, not just from, topsoil from fields outside of Winnipeg, for example, or some of the dust, some of the winter grime, but it was actually pulling some of this dust from Montana, from North Dakota, pulling it into the upper atmosphere and kind of dragging it like a big net, basically, across the prairies and expelling all of that in the wind that we saw.
Yeah, you could feel it yesterday. There was like a big wall of dust. Kind of was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is what Mars is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very strange. So how rare is something like this, though?
Not that usual at all. Like, it's quite rare. I had dug back into the archives last night for Manitoba, and the last time that we actually saw something similar to this was back on May 17th of 1984. Winnipeg, southern Manitoba did see some very windy conditions. Nothing like we saw yesterday in terms of peak winds, but certainly very windy on that day back in 1984. Similar dust storms, some of the topsoil was being pulled off of the fields, and some of the very strong winds and creating some of these walls of dust.
Okay, and what were the biggest gusts last night?
Okay, so yesterday I've got several communities that were sort of in the 100 plus kilometer an hour club here. Deloraine 119 yesterday was the peak wind gust. Minto 113. Brandon peaked at about 106. That's where we did see some damage to road signs, for example, last night. Holland, Glenboro 100 kilometers an hour. Shiloh, Ninette, Treeherne at 100. And elsewhere in there, Wawanesa was about 99 or 98 or something. So in southwestern Manitoba, that's where we saw some of the strongest winds, 90 kilometers an hour plus. Dauphin getting a gust of 93 kilometers an hour yesterday. Winnipeg peaked at 87 kilometers an hour last night, and things have started to back off a bit now. We're down to 40, gusting to about 60 in Winnipeg. Still in the west, looking at Brandon's winds right now, west 60, gusting to just about 90 this morning.
Wild. And just, I know Abby kind of gave us today's forecast, but we're looking ahead to the long weekend. Everyone wants to know what's ahead for us this weekend.
Well, cooler temperatures for the long weekend as things go here with Manitoba. So we are looking at still freezing rain warnings, winter storm warnings in place for parts of northern Manitoba. We should start to see those lifted as we get through the day. But in behind this area of low pressure, as it sits over Lake Winnipeg right now, there is a trough that will start to form in the jet stream in behind this, and this is going to pull some much cooler air in to parts of the province as we get through the long weekend. So as we get through tomorrow, looking at temperatures slightly below seasonal again, down to around 14, 15 degrees across southern Manitoba, cooler, closer to the freezing mark in northern Manitoba. And then I'm watching another system that'll push up from the States, and for southern Manitoba at least, this one looks a bit more promising in terms of bringing some actual moisture to the southern half of the province as we get through the back half of the long weekend. So looking at things wet. Right now, there's still a little bit of play with the timing on this next system, but it's likely a later Sunday through Monday, lasting into Tuesday morning event. with some showers and periods of rain. Monday, not a total washout. Certainly, there'll be some dry slots in there, but I am looking at some moisture pushing across the south. A little early to talk about amounts with that one yet. I have to kind of dig into some of the modeling this morning on that. But looking at some moisture through the back half of the weekend, temperatures by Monday down to the single digits for daytime highs. But I know it's the long weekend. We all want the warm temperatures, right? As we get into next week, we climb back into the high teens, low 20s by late next week again.
Thanks for ending on a hopeful note.
Yes, you're welcome.
That is Riley Lachuk, your CBC weather specialist. Well, up next here on the show, in classrooms across Manitoba, students may soon be learning Anishinaabe-Moin in an unexpected place inside a video game. A new project called Turtle Island Trails uses the world of Fortnite to teach Indigenous language and culture and through quests, challenges, and storytelling. And CBC's Jim Agapito visited the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center Incorporated here in Winnipeg.
So I'm in the central village right now. You can see the teepees. They've been custom designed for our map. And you'll notice that there are placeholders with text right now for the different directions. But we're going to be removing those and using the medicine wheel as our compass. My name's Carl Hildebrandt, and I'm an education technology facilitator for the Manitoba First Nations school system. And that's where we are today. We're in our head office here in Winnipeg, and we're here to talk about Fortnite.
So why was Fortnite the correct platform to use for this? For this game to teach?
Kids absolutely love Fortnite. It's been around for years and kids still gravitate toward it. And, anytime that they see it on a device that I bring into the schools, they're like, dude, you got Fortnite on here? Can I play? And now I can tell them, yeah, we can play. Every school that I visit, kids are still in love with Fortnite. It's been around for years now. I used to be a grade 7 teacher in a classroom, and when it first came out, kids would just get up out of their desk and break out into a Fortnite dance. And if you weren't part of the lingo, you had no idea what was going on. And even now, 15 years later, kids still love it. It also kind of takes away the technological barriers because every kid knows how to play. That's not a barrier.
Why was it important to include the 7 teachings in this gameplay?
They're such a big part of Anishinaabe culture, and we really wanted to have kids see themselves and their traditions and their culture embedded in the game, but also in terms of the narrative, it just fit because your whole point of this is to achieve the good life and know that it comes in cycles, and while it might be okay now and peaceful, after it might happen again. And in our game, you have to thwart the evil presence of the Wendigo to ensure that the good life is what is achieved. So we applied for a grant to teach Anishinaabe-Moin in Fortnite. Pretty crazy idea. And the government of Canada accepted and told us, yep, here you go, and you've got 2 years to develop this. And then the next thing we had to do is take the narrative and our script and get it validated and verified by language speakers, by elders, knowledge keepers. We came up with this plan to have a player achieve the 7 teachings in Fortnite and thwart the evil presence of a Wendigo, which is associated with greed and colonialism, taking too much and things like that.
We're starting off here. Can you describe what we're seeing right now?
For sure. So right now we are inside Turtle Island, and you spawn at this central village. As you can see, there's an elder over here that's going to direct us to our next steps. It tells me that I need to head east and seek knowledge from the stone. So that's what I'm going to do over here. This is one of the grandfather stones, or a sin, and they act like a Rosetta Stone. They enable you access to the dictionary, where in the next set of challenges, these are the words that are going to be used, and they're padded with English. And again, in the beginning, the challenges are set up so they're a little bit easier with more English, and then as you conquer them and go to the final 7th challenge, there's going to be less and less English and more for you to rely on the Anishinaabe and make sure that you understand it. We brought these people together to tell us and to ensure that culture, tradition, and language was being appreciated. And one of the things, the resounding kind of consensus in the room, is that even though Anishinaabe-Moin is spoken widely across parts of Ontario and Manitoba, it's spoken differently. There's dialect in each one of these communities. And to ensure that we're respecting that, in the Educator Guide, we are actually showcasing some of that dialect from those communities. In a video game, in terms of how a student learns language, and we had to keep it universal so that they don't get confused.
Bonjour, my name is Davin Dumas. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Centre.
What do you think it's like for students to learn language through a video game?
Well, I think it's going to be an awesome opportunity for learning language in a way that the children are engaged in these days. A lot of them are gamers and a lot of them are playing Fortnite. I believe that by incorporating language into a platform that they're already on, they'll learn. They'll learn the words that are being shared. They'll learn the greetings, the different animals that are portrayed, and the teachings especially that are in the game. Well, I think the biggest piece is that they can see their culture, their language in a platform that you normally probably wouldn't see a First Nation language in.
Do you think that this is something that students are going to want to do outside of school in their free time and learn secretly through this video game?
Well, my hope is that with the pride that it will instill in knowing that there's a Fortnite island, a Fortnite game that's in their language, that perhaps they would share it with other students, other children, and particularly those that may not be First Nation. A lot of times our First Nation languages are discounted or not seen as a part of everyday society. But by embedding it in a video game that children are playing, absolutely, that brings it to the forefront of what's happening these days, right?
That's CBC's Jim Agapito visiting the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Centre here in Winnipeg. And Turtle Island Trials is expected to be released in September. Well, coming up later on the show, we're going to speak to a retail analyst about a new Japanese clothing store opening today in the city. And he thinks the store is part of a larger trend that we'll be seeing in the future.
Yeah, I predict that consumers are a little more choiceful now, and especially younger consumers, Gen Z and millennials, they want to buy from a company that is more well-rounded, I think, when you look at quality, longevity, messaging, community.
So more on that story coming up later here on Information Radio. And that store, if you're wondering, it's called Uniqlo. Well, up next here on the show, we're going to return now to The Young and the Jobless, our series following youth unemployment in Canada and right here at home. Well, Canada's youth unemployment rate is the worst it's been in 30 years. And at 14.3%, it's double the national average across all age groups. And series producer Chloe Friesen has been exploring an overlooked impact of youth unemployment, mental health. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you've been talking to a lot of young people over the past few weeks, and what have they told you about the mental health impact of all this?
Corey, it's interesting because while many of the youth I talked to didn't explicitly mention mental health, there was this underlying mood or mindset that snuck into every conversation that I had. Here are some examples. This is 18-year-old high school student Simone Jansen telling me about what it's like to not hear back after applying for a job.
It kind of makes me feel like my resume or just me in general isn't kind of like good enough to get a reply.
And here's 18-year-old Noah Monson.
As someone who's like super self-conscious, I'm like, oh, maybe it's just like me as a person. Maybe like my whole identity is shown on my resume and maybe that's all they're going to know of me.
In other words, maybe I'm just not good enough. And when you imagine these kids applying for dozens of jobs and getting rejected dozens of times, you can start to understand how this poor self-esteem can grow.
And you actually found some facts some stats that show that these kids aren't alone. So what do they show?
So the stats that I found paint a very similar and kind of worrying picture, if I'm being honest. There's a new report from Mental Health Research Canada. It's appropriately titled A Generation Under Pressure, and it found that economic pressures and job insecurity are accelerating the youth mental health crisis. Here's Akila Peoples, the CEO of MHRC.
We are in a situation where we have this perfect storm of all of these pressures that, quite frankly, Canadians are facing, but they're impacting youth even more.
So, Corey, here are some of the big numbers that stood out to me. First, 82% of Canadian youth feel stressed and anxious about the future of their career, and 72% of youth believe that no matter how hard they work, bigger forces out of their control will influence their financial future. Locally, youth in Saskatchewan and Manitoba were most likely to respond always when asked if they were stressed or anxious about the future of their career.
Now, I know probably anyone who's ever applied for a job, maybe even been rejected for a job, can probably relate to some of these feelings. But why does this impact youth, so acutely?
So, plain and simple, they have less experience with it, so it stings more. They're also more likely to take it personally. Carolyn Clausen is a Winnipeg therapist.
Young people don't always know how to interpret failure or rejection, and sometimes they can take it on to mean more than it does. And so it can feel like the rejection of them as a person or of them as a human being or their ability to contribute, and they can label their global well-being based on the most recent rejection.
Also, with unemployment, there's a risk of a rising NEET rate. And NEET is an acronym. It stands for Not in Employment, Education, or Training. So no job, no school, no trades programs, nothing. And this is an actual stat collected by Stats Canada. NEET youth are at risk for economic and social difficulties, and studies show they face a higher risk of mental health struggles like depression, anxiety, and suicide.
So is there a solution here at all? Or?
We're going to start with a big picture. Here's Akila Peoples again. She's the CEO of Mental Health Research Canada. She wants to see all levels of government take youth unemployment more seriously.
This is our future. This is our future workforce. And this is limiting our innovation, our productivity, and Canada's long-term resiliency. So this is a very serious policy and system level issue that everybody needs to be taking note of. This is our future.
Now, when it comes to individual young people, Carolyn Clausen, that therapist that I spoke to, said support is the next best thing and that parents can play a big role. Simple things like telling your kid you believe in them, asking how you can best support them, but also acknowledging the fact that the job market is different now compared to when they were a teen. But also, this was interesting, helping youth prepare for and embrace failure.
That even if it's hard and even if it doesn't go well, and even if that first summer you're not successful, that doesn't mean that there wasn't value in the effort. Trust me, at the end of your life, you'll remember a lot more from your failures than you will from your successes. And so I think we have to figure out how to build in opportunity to practice and to learn without success being a necessary part of the equation for us to feel like we got something out of it.
And for the youth who can't find that support at home, Corey, organizations like Yes Manitoba are ready to step in. I spoke to Erica Seidler. She's the Executive Director of Youth Unemployment Services Manitoba, or Yes Manitoba. They offer coaching, training, workshops, and most importantly, a supportive space for youth 16 to 29 who are looking for a job. Erica told me that demand for their services has been growing.
We're constantly looking at changing and evolving our services and supports to meet that and to really be that champion, because that's what youth need, right? Like they need that person behind them to be like, just keep on going. Like you get through this and, things will pay off.
And lastly, I've noticed that some healthy commiseration can really help too. In all of my conversations with young job hunters, they told me that they actually felt comforted by the fact that they weren't alone. It helped them shift their perspective from, maybe it's just me, to it's probably just the economy. Listeners might remember our earlier conversation with 18-year-old Annabelle Dacey, but I think this clip illustrates what I'm talking about here.
It is really, really nice to know that I'm not the only one in that boat. Even if it's just, when I'm talking with friends, they're all in similar situations, and it's one thing when it's that, but hearing people online and in my communities that they're in the exact same position I am is surprisingly a good feeling, knowing that I've not done something wrong.
Well, Chloe, thanks for bringing us this story.
Thank you.
That's the CBC's Chloe Friesen continuing our series, The Young and the Jobless. Well, stay tuned here. Still to come here on Information Radio. Campgrounds are setting up shop, dusting off the shelves, and cranking up the heaters as the May long weekend typically signifies the start of camping season. We're going to speak with two Manitoba campground owners about how many bookings they've been seeing for this weekend in particular. Also, as mentioned earlier, another global Japanese brand is coming to Winnipeg. Uniqlo opens its doors today at CF Polo Park, and according to one retail analyst, the store is expected to be very popular among Gen Zers and millennials. We're going to talk about why coming up after 8 o'clock. Right now, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at your news headlines.
Good morning. The cousin of a 39-year-old Riverton homicide victim is in shock, but relieved his search is over. Mike Clausen searched day in and day out for Daryl Lambert after he disappeared almost 2 months ago. Clausen says Lambert disappeared just days after his mother had died of cancer. This week, RCMP found Lambert's body in a vehicle in Riverton. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. How strong was yesterday's wind? Strong enough to blow over that massive Esso sign that has stood outside the gas station on Highway 1 in Brandon for more than 20 years. We're going to hear from the manager of that gas station coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Wild. No
yes,
way.
so strong.
That is crazy. Well, thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Wow, 119 kilometers per hour. That was Deloraine yesterday. That was the wind that Deloraine saw. That got the most wind in the province. If you see anything going on your commute, and if you see anything else in terms of the impacts of the wind, you can always email us, radio893@cbc.ca. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcoux. And if you see anything on the commute, you can also call us at 204-788-3093. We'll be back after World Report.
Everyone in the world knowing her song Fast Car. She'll talk about her career and how busking prepared her to play in front of 90,000 people at the free Nelson Mandela concert in 1988.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Dr. Alika Lafontaine is known as an innovator in healthcare, but now something else has caught his attention. Dr. Lafontaine about what happens when the growing sense of anger in a polarized world turns to outrage. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Calgary today to finalize a major industrial carbon pricing deal with Premier Danielle Smith. The agreement is a critical step toward building a new bitumen pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast. While Carney pitched a clean energy future just yesterday, he says this project would go ahead as long as the Pathways carbon capture initiative is completed. Critics argue the technology is unproven, but for the energy sector, today's announcement is the breakthrough they've been waiting for. The CBC's Janice McGregor is covering the story in Ottawa. Janice, this is the third time over the last week we've seen the Carney government shift its approach to energy regulations. What's the political calculation here?
John, despite all the talk this week of the value of being pragmatic, this is an uncomfortable spot for the Liberals. Danielle Smith's been able to deliver for Alberta's industry a longer time horizon, leading to a lower effective carbon price than the regulations of Justin Trudeau's era would have indulged. The market price of their carbon is trading so low there's no business case for the major carbon capture and storage investments like the Pathways Alliance Storage Hub. Prime Minister Mark Carney specifically inserted that into the MOU as a condition to offset the environmental harm of expanding oil sands production with another bitumen pipeline.
It includes very much the Pathways project moving forward. No pathways, no pipeline, so all those elements moving forward. But we're making progress.
Staking out middle ground can be politically thankless, even risky, because no one gets what they want. Federal Liberals might tout their flexibility here, but sometimes it all comes down to just encouraging premiers to say, hey, where's my special deal?
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Canada's largest white nationalist group is coordinating with fascist fight clubs in the United States. A CBC News investigation has learned that Second Sons Canada met with the founder of the global what's called the Active Club movement during a trip to Texas. Experts warn these groups pose a serious threat to public safety. Christian Poslang has this exclusive report from CBC's Visual Investigations Unit.
When I first saw that picture, I laughed because despite the blurring,
I knew it was Rondeau right away.
Journalist Michael Colborne has been following Robert Rondeau for years, and he says there's no doubt it's Rondeau, the founder of the global white supremacist active club movement, in a blurred photo with 2 members of Second Sons Canada, a major white nationalist group in this country. Second Sons members traveled to the U.S. in late March, meeting there with several other fascist fight clubs that train in combat sports. But a CBC visual investigation also finds that, while in Texas, the Canadian group met with Rondeau, who was sentenced to 2 years in prison for rioting at political events. They also participated in a South Carolina combat sports tournament and event organized by Patriot Front, a notorious American white nationalist group.
I think it's very significant that we're seeing Canadians travel across the border.
Stephen Ray, a digital research manager with the think tank Institute for Strategic Dialogue, says this kind of travel is becoming more organized, and the involvement of Canadian groups is a sign that the movement is global.
This shows that this problem of white supremacy is not isolated to Canada alone, and that the white supremacist groups in Canada are not operating within geographical silos.
Second Sons Canada has grown rapidly since 2024, with chapters across the country. Christian Paz-Lang, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can find the visual investigation team's full report on our website, cbc.ca/news. U.S. President Donald Trump is heading home after his summit with China's Xi Jinping. A band played as the U.S. president climbed the steps of Air Force One this morning. Trump is hailing his state visit as a success, and President Xi says relations with the U.S. are stabilizing. However, it's not clear how much progress was made on key differences. Emily Sue has the latest from Hong Kong.
Following yesterday's warm exchanges, Friday's meeting of superpowers began with a rare tour of the Zhongnanhai complex. It's a former imperial garden that houses the walled-off offices of Chinese leaders. President Donald Trump asks whether other leaders are ever brought here. Very few, replies Xi Jinping. For example, Putin. In their talks today, the Chinese leader hailed what he called a milestone visit and said the two sides had reached understanding on cooperative outcomes. The two countries have agreed to keep trade ties stable and to continue communicating with one another. The U.S. also says China agrees on the need to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. But it was unclear just how concrete other results were. In a televised interview earlier, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said China would invest billions of dollars in soybeans and other agricultural goods. Trump also said Beijing would buy 200 Boeing planes. But details remain thin, and there was little mention of what Beijing wanted in return. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says U.S. policy on Taiwan had not changed. For Beijing, it's a red line. It regards the self-governing island as its territory and warns Washington against supplying it with arms. A U.S. shipment of weapons is pending and could quickly undo any progress made in Beijing. Emily Sue for CBC News, Hong Kong.
Africa's top health body has declared an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Officials with the Africa Centers for Disease Control say at least 65 people have died, and there are close to 250 suspected cases. Most of the infections are in a remote northeastern province. A previous outbreak in eastern DRC between 2018 and 2020 killed more than 1,000 people. Meanwhile, Manitoba is fighting a persistent outbreak of hepatitis A. Infections continue to spread more than a year after the outbreak was first declared. There have been more than 600 cases and 3 people have died. Health officials are raising the alarm, while First Nations leaders are calling for more help. Karen Pauls has the story.
They're nauseous, they're vomiting, they may be having diarrhea.
Dr. Kieran Ginger is regularly treating cases of hepatitis A at Winnipeg's inner city teaching hospital.
Some people may be experiencing liver failure, bleeding issues. Of course, liver failure can lead to multi-organ failure.
The infectious liver disease is spreading among vulnerable populations, including people experiencing homelessness, people who share needles, and crowded households.
Most of our homes don't have running water. They don't have plumbing.
Alex McDougall is a Grand Chief who represents 4 northern Manitoba communities which have declared states of emergency because of an outbreak there.
There was one recent that passed, another one from Sagamak, a young boy, a 5-year-old.
The province has expanded eligibility eligibility for free hepatitis A vaccines to people 6 months and older. Indigenous Services Canada is supporting community-wide vaccination clinics. But Dr. Carol Kurbis, Manitoba's Medical Officer of Health and Communicable Diseases, says Hep A is hard to control.
You can be contagious for up to 2 weeks before symptoms develop and up to a week afterwards. So you can be spreading the virus before you're even aware that you're sick.
Back at the hospital, Dr. Ginger thinks the province should declare a public health emergency like it did for HIV last week.
My concern is that people are going to die.
Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And finally, worsening traffic in southern Ontario has some municipal leaders looking to reroute onto the water. Expanding marine shipping on the Great Lakes could reduce the amount of freight on our roads, but experts warn of environmental and infrastructure concerns. The CBC's Jeffrey Tram reports.
More trucks, more congestion, and more pressure on highways across southern Ontario. That's part of the reason leaders from Canadian and U.S. cities bordering the Great Lakes recently met in Hamilton. The goal to convince companies to instead move goods across the water. Jonathan Altenberg is CEO of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative.
We have less than 50% of the capacity that can be handled by the St. Lawrence River.
But will it actually help take trucks off the road?
The short answer is yes, that's true.
Elkafi Hassini is a professor at McMaster University's School of Business. He says marine shipping can reduce both costs and emissions.
Typical vessel could take up to 100 hundreds, I would say, of full truckloads.
But Hassini says there's a major issue.
We don't have the infrastructure to handle that additional freight.
Ian Borsuk is executive director of Environment Hamilton. He says while truck traffic has worsened pollution, increased shipping traffic could also bring environmental risks.
This is where our drinking water comes from.
He says any expansion on the lakes must include strong environmental protections. But with congestion growing across the region, pressure is building to finding alternatives to trucking. Jeffrey Tram, CBC News, Hamilton.
And that's the latest. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. It is Friday, May 15th, and another global Japanese brand is coming to Winnipeg. It's called Uniqlo, and it opens its doors today at CF Polo Park. And according to one retail analyst, the store is expected to be very popular among Gen Zers and millennials. We're going to talk about why coming up here on the show. Also, Mother Nature wants you to enjoy the great outdoors, and campground owners are getting ready for your visit. We're going to speak with two owners who say they're ready, but the weather is keeping a few campers away. That conversation coming up right here on Information Radio. Stay tuned. Right now, though, at 8:11, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, many people in southern Manitoba felt and heard this yesterday. Wow, that was near Elgin. As a windstorm blew across the southern part of the province, Deloraine clocked the strongest gusts at 119 kilometers an hour. Minto was 113, where a wind-caused power outage has now closed that school for today. And in Brandon, 106 kilometers an hour was strong enough to knock over a massive Esso sign at the gas station on the Trans-Canada. We're going to hear from the manager of that station coming up at 8:30. The Arm of Gimli is being asked to prevent all-terrain vehicles from threatening the lives of scores of garter snakes. An online petition signed by more than 600 people wants permanent barriers to be set up around a den on land owned by the municipality. We're going to hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News Desk. Abby Adeyemi, what's going on with the weather?
Well, after that powerful low pressure system that moved through yesterday, we still have two different weather stories this Friday. Southern Manitoba, cooler, but we're still going to be noticing some strong winds in some parts of the province, while for the northern regions, there's still this winter stormy conditions in present there. Hence, Environment Canada has wind warnings and dust storms warnings across the Pembina Valley region all the way into the Westman region. This includes regions around Morden, tracking it all the way towards Brandon and the Verdun area. Strong west and northwest winds are still going to be gusting between 50 and 70 kilometers in exposed areas, keeping visibility reduced at times. And of course, further north, we have winter storm warnings in effect for the Thompson area and towards Churchill, where we're looking at 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, freezing rain, and of course, icy conditions. But for Winnipeg right now, conditions are around 15 degrees, mostly cloudy. Cold front is moved through, replacing Thursday's heat and dust with more like cooler and fresher air this morning. But it still remains brisk with the winds coming from the northwest. We see high around 20 degrees for the city today, under a mix of sun and clouds, and a slim chance of showers in the forecast. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 15 degrees.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
And right now, Sierra Sanders joins us. It's been a pretty slow commute overall.
Yeah, it's been pretty quiet, Corey. Haven't gotten too many calls on the commuter line. The calls that I have gotten were in regards to the North Perimeter just before the Brookside Overpass, or in the area of the Brookside Overpass. They were calling about a big and slow train that was causing some backups in both directions. Those calls from Tom and Corey, another Corey out there. I wonder if he's with an E or just without.
I'm
no
not
E.
sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of a thing in the Corey community.
Okay.
E, no E, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a hot topic, hot debate these days.
Totally.
But got calls from both of them about that big and slow train that was causing some backups in both directions there. Haven't gotten an update on that situation though, so if you're in the area, I'd love to hear about that. So you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, or if a new backup or new situation has popped up on your commute, you can give me a call. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
Well, in 2 hours, you'll be able to shop at a global Japanese clothing store right here in Winnipeg. Uniqlo is opening its doors today at CF Polo Park, and many have been eager about the brand coming to the city. And according to one retail analyst, Gen Z and millennials are especially excited about this. Bruce Winder is a longtime retail analyst, and he joins us now from Toronto. Hello there.
Hey, thanks for having me on the program.
Thanks for joining us. So for those who don't know Uniqlo, how would you describe the store?
Yeah, it's a really cool store. It's sort of very minimalistic type of designs. They have a brand called Lifewear, and the concept is that they make simplistic, durable, accessible clothing that has longevity, and it has a nice mix of affordability and style and design for casual wear. And they had a store. I went to the grand opening in Toronto about a decade ago, and it was pretty fun. But yeah, I think folks in the Winnipeg area in Manitoba are going to enjoy the new store.
I can't. I'm trying to. It kind of. I was looking at the website, and
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me a little bit. And maybe it's probably more affordable than American Apparel was, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of American Apparel, just kind of very simple. Do you think it kind of fills that sort of gap that's been left by American Apparel?
Yeah, it could be. There's something. I mean, not everyone wants to buy sort of fast fashion from H&M and Zara. They want something with a bit more quality, something that'll last them a few years, right, and meets their needs, but still looks stylish. And that's what I find Uniqlo offers.
So it hasn't been an easy time for big store brands with the closure of the Bay last summer and the changing retail landscape with malls struggling in the past. So how do you think this brand will do in a mall here in Winnipeg?
I think it's going to do really well. I mean, if anything, it might even draw more people to the Polo Park area because it is something, once people get a taste of it and get a feel for the brand and the value, I think you're going to see a lot of traffic there. So it's going to help, if anything, bring traffic to the mall.
And why is this particularly popular among, younger generations, Gen Z, and even, millennials like myself?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of a great combination. It's like the intersection of value, style and design, longevity, sustainability, community, and a whole bunch of things that really, they found a formula. It works really well. And specifically, like I said, I mean, all ages can shop there. They have children's, baby products, men's, women's, but it hits a really nice point right now, especially as younger people are watching their money and they're on a budget. You can get some good clothing for reasonable prices.
And what else are you noticing among Gen Zs when it comes to mall culture in general? Is it making a comeback?
It is actually, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it's because of the whole Stranger Things, mall tribute, but you know what? We're noticing that Gen Zs are going to the malls again, and maybe they're looking for a little more social interaction, or they just want to touch and feel it, or there's some nostalgia. I know nostalgia is big with that generation right now, but for whatever reason, you're seeing more of them flock to malls.
How does the growth of Uniqlo differ from other stores? Because it seems like it actually grows a little bit slower than some other places.
Yeah, Uniqlo is really smart about methodically taking their time and researching a market and really studying the community. And then when they open, they do it differently. They embed themselves in the community. So they take their time. It's not about trying to, put as many stores on the corner as possible. It's about creating meaningful connections and activations in specific communities. And I think that served them well.
And as part of their opening in the city, so Uniqlo it collaborated with actually local business and local artists for customized clothing items. So, how important is customization, even localization in these kind of bigger, multinational retail stores these days? Is that a trend you're seeing as well?
Well, I see it as a differentiator. Not everyone is doing it, but I think I've noticed that Uniqlo, they've got Guns Bakery, Little Sister Coffee Maker, a whole bunch of local collabs, and they have a local designer for some t-shirts and things too. So it's really important because you want to give back to the community. You want to be part of the community. You don't want to just go there and sell clothing, fabric by the pound like some people do. You want to embed yourself in the community and be meaningful and give back too.
And finally, here, I think we had a debate in the newsroom. We couldn't figure out whether it's an Uniqlo, are both acceptable. How do you even say it?
Yeah, I think it's Uniqlo, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind either way, right? But it is a Japanese company, so there's probably a special pronunciation in Japanese, which I don't have. But I just call it Uniqlo. But I think whatever works is good for everyone.
Well, Bruce, thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Take care.
Bruce Winder is a retail analyst of 13 years.
The puck may have dropped on the playoffs, but the news doesn't stop for hockey. I'm Brittany Greenslade, host of CBC Winnipeg News at 6. To get your local news, stream CBC Winnipeg News at 6, 24/7 on CBC Gem, the CBC News app, and selected streaming platforms. CBC Winnipeg News at 6, your local news on your favorite streaming device.
8:20 right now, and thought I'd mention we've locked down a location for our Niverville remote show here on Information Radio. So on May 28th, that's a Thursday, we're going to be live from the Community General Store in Niverville. It's right in Main Street, right in the core of Niverville. It just opened a few years ago. So we're going to be joined, Marcy and I will be there. So feel free to come on down. They're going to open up a bit early for us that morning as well. So you can come on down for a coffee, and we'll maybe even pull you on air to talk about why you love living in Niverville. Or if you're even from the surrounding area, come on down. We'd love to have you by, and maybe we'll even pull you on the show as well. So come on down. That's on May 28th at the Community General Store in Niverville. Well, next up here on the show, for many, the May long weekend signifies the start of the camping season. That means campground owners have been busy getting their sites in order, but Mother Nature has been late to the party. And Ashley Smith is with us now. She's the owner of Turtle Village. We actually have Mike Touchette actually first here. Sorry about that. We have a couple people. Right now it's Mike Touchette, and he is the owner of Cripple Creek Campground in Richer, Manitoba. Hello there, Mike.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So how preparations for the season been going so far?
Well, Mother Nature has not cooperated. It's been very, very cold. We just got our water turned on this week. We're getting all our testing done, which is probably what 90% of the campgrounds are doing at the moment.
And how long have
So,
you? Yeah. How unique of a year is this for you so far? Is this pretty unusual to have like such a last minute setup?
it is highly unusual. We're not scrambling because we did get a lot of other time to do other things, but the water is the big, big issue. Everybody wants water. So water is very difficult to get going. There's a lot of regulations regarding water.
And
So,
what does that mean for booking so far? How booked up are you?
well, the bookings started off okay a couple of weeks ago when we opened up. The bookings were starting. And May Long is always a bit of a crap shoot, right? You never know what's going to come with the weather. So we do get some reservations. Then they start looking at the weather going, it's going to be 0 on Saturday, so I don't want to go camping now.
Right.
But that's normal. It's a normal May Long.
Right. Are there still some hardy folks who are still coming out?
Well, you see, so we have 108 seasonal sites, and they come out regardless. They come out because for them, there's nothing like sitting around a campfire at night, just relaxing, having s'mores with the kids, or playing games during the day. And our beach is obviously it's open, I guess, but who wants to go swimming when the water's 7 degrees Celsius? It's a little bit cold.
Yeah, it might be a bit cold. That's right. Also, is there a fire ban right now for you guys?
Due to the high winds, currently there's a fire ban. It's also very, very dry, so we actually don't recommend anybody to have a fire at the moment. We do, now that we have water on, it's a little bit safer because, as a rule, seasonal campers in every campground will take their hose and douse around their campsite, and then they have plenty of water at night to put the fire out completely. We insist that they run 10 minutes of water on their fire just to make sure it's out.
That makes sense. And in general, just how long have you been running the Cripple Creek campground for now?
We built it in 2008 and opened in 2009.
Okay. And what do you notice in the past few years? I know last year probably with the smoke, things like that, it must have been a little bit touch and go some days as well. What's it been like the past few years for you as someone, where the weather's kind of been all up and down and pretty tough going?
Well, regardless, camping people are generally hardy. So when they're not allowed fires, let's say due to a fire ban, they find other things. So they'll do like propane fire pits, which are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with those. As for, wind and stuff, you can't really control wind. All it is fire bans. Last year, the smoke was horrendous. A lot of people canceled last year due to smoke because they can't handle it. It's just too much.
And what do you love about just running a campground?
You know what? I'm going to tell you honestly, it's about watching families. It's about watching the kids growing up. Like here at Cripple Creek, we do one thing in particular, and that's when little kids show up on bikes with training wheels. Once they learn how to ride their bike without training wheels, they have to come and show me at the office. And then some of them refer to me as Uncle Mike. And then I give them a free ice cream sandwich that's their prize for being able to ride a bike without training wheels.
I love that.
Now, I've had adults try. I'm telling you right now.
Well, love that. Sounds like you're building quite a lovely community out there. Thanks for joining us, Mike, and all the best this long weekend. Let's hope it gets warmer for you in the future.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
That's Mike Touchette. He is the owner of Cripple Creek Campground in Richer, Manitoba. Also with us now, we're going to head out west. Ashley Smith is the owner of Turtle Village in Riding Mountain National Park. Good morning, Ashley.
Hello?
Oh, hi there, Ashley. So it's been, as I was just talking to with Mike there, it's been a chilly start to the season so far. How's that impacted your preparation so far?
Just personally, obviously we would like it to be a little bit warmer, but it's not, so we go with the flow. There's no such thing as bad weather. You just have bad clothing. That's the way I think about it.
That's a good way to see it. So describe what it looks like up there in Riding Mountain right now, because I know there could be one thing in the rest of Manitoba and southern Manitoba, but then Riding Mountain always seems like it's either still going to be a little bit more snowy or a little more rainy. Well, what's it looking like?
Yeah, we're in our own little globe up here on the little mountain that we live on. So right now it's it's not as nice as it is in Winnipeg or other parts of the province, but we're kind of used to that. So, the bugs come a little bit later, and right now there's still ice on the water. We don't have snow this year, which is really good. The wind is a little bit, it's there and you can notice it, but when you're tucked away in the campground, it kind of shelters itself in the trees there. So it's not bad.
And what are reservations looking like for you this year? Because you offer it's unique. It's not just like people set up your tent. It's they're domes, right? That people camp in. What are reservations looking like?
Yeah, so we have hard shells. So they're insulated metal panels. So they're quite different from what people are used to in the park. So they're nice and cozy. Right now we have 8 accommodations, and we have about 5 bookings this weekend. So we're going pretty good. We have a couple more if people want to travel out last minute and come check out the park.
And of course, there's some new rules now for Clear Lake and what people can do on motorized boats or not. How have those new rules affected bookings or responses that you've heard from campers so far this year?
Yeah, last year was a different story compared to this year. I think people are just frankly getting a little bit tired, maybe annoyed with the inconsistency. But the guests that we have, they're very outdoorsy. They like to, kind of do things on the land. They're not so much big boat owners, rather kayaks and canoes and swimming and such. So they're very happy to be able to do that again. But yeah, it's still a bit inconsistent. We don't really know how long this will last or what's going to happen, but we have to move on.
For people who are wondering, so there's non-motorized boat days, Mondays and Tuesdays. That's when it's only non-motorized boats on the lake. So that's what they've worked out there to work around issues with, of course, zebra mussels. And as well there, I know gas prices, a big thing too. Is that keeping people away at all, that from what you've heard of from driving all the way out west to Riding Mountain, say from Winnipeg or anywhere else in the province?
Yeah, we are seeing the campers hitting the highway, so that's a good sign. That is quite expensive to haul a big camper out there. What's unique about us is you get to show up come in a car or even on a bike and come and park at Turtle Village, and it's very cost effective. So yeah, we're seeing people get out. It's been a long winter.
Yeah, and I asked Mike, I gotta ask you too, Ashley, what do you love about running a small campground?
Oh, I love being outdoors. First of all, I love people experiencing life on the land rather than cooped up in, say, a hotel or a different type of accommodation. You want to go to a destination, but you want to also experience it through where you're staying. And I think that's what we offer. Our turtle shells are very low to the ground. We have lots of panoramic views. So you get to see the park, you get to see the wildlife, you get to see the elements as soon as you wake up, and the stars when you go to bed. So I love to see that people leave a lot of messages, handwritten notes, thanking us for the unique stay that they had, and it just fills my heart.
Well, love that. All the best this season, Ashley. I know it's a cold weekend ahead, but let's hope for some warmer times in the coming months.
Yes, Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. Ashley Smith is the owner of Turtle Village in Riding Mountain National Park. Time now for your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 15 degrees. The wind gusting right now to 69 kilometers an hour. And that wind is going to continue through the day with gusts to 80 from the southwest this morning and then becoming northwesterly. And that strong northwest wind will cool us to a high today of just 20, which is seasonal for this kind of time of year, but we will cool down through the long weekend. Well, wind blown in southern Manitoba. That was near Elgin as a windstorm blew across the southern part of the province yesterday. Deloraine clocked the strongest gusts at 119 kilometers an hour. Minto was 113, where a wind-caused power outage has closed school for today. Here in Winnipeg, the wind may have felt strong, with the highest gust clocked at a mere 87 kilometers an hour. Now in Brandon, wind reached 106 kilometers an hour, strong enough that a sign that has stood near the TransCanada and 18th Street North for a quarter of a century came crashing down. The massive Esso gas station sign is just one of a number of signs in the area blown over. Dave McLean is the manager of the Highway Esso in Brandon. He got a text from his staff around 8 last night that the sign had come down, and McLean has never seen anything like it.
It looks like some of the support bolts either sheared off or were ripped out of the moorings. And so part of the sign toppled off into a bush, thankfully causing no harm to anyone.
McLean says fortunately the toppled sign isn't blocking the drive-through for the Tim Hortons. Right now they are assessing whether the Esso sign will need to be replaced or whether insurance will cover it. The family of a 39-year-old Riverton man who was missing for months and is now a homicide victim are in shock. Daryl Lambert disappeared almost 2 months ago. His cousin Mike Clausen led the search for Lambert.
It's totally consumed my life, day in and day out, searching and not sleeping and everything. So it's, in one way, it's kind of a weird thing to say. It's nice to have the closure, but it's so we can move forward with the next steps. But it's absolutely devastating.
Clausen says Lambert disappeared days after his mother died of cancer. He says his cousin was an electrician and regularly helped people fix electronics. RCMP found Lambert's body this week in a vehicle in Riverton. A 41-year-old man is charged with second-degree murder. Clausen believes Lambert and the suspect were acquaintances. Provincial funding could help a southern Manitoba library increase security measures. The province promised $200,000 to Steinbach in April for community safety. Steinbach Mayor Earl Funk says some of that could go to the Jake Epp Library. That library has had a number of safety incidents in the past year, and Funk says the city is looking for ways to help.
We need to know the parameters of this money, and then from there we can go, okay, this is what we can do. Okay, now the library board meets, gives us projects, and then we can go from there.
The library has turned to short-term solutions like bag checks and locking bathrooms, according to Library Director Aubrey Walker. Now the goal is to find longer-term fixes like installing security cameras. The RM of Gimli is being urged to protect scores of garter snakes from being crushed under the wheels of all-terrain vehicles. An online petition signed by more than 600 people asks for permanent barriers to be set up around a den on land owned by the municipality. Potentially thousands of snakes emerge from the den every spring to mate and feed before returning in the fall. Tammy Scogan lives in the neighboring RM of Armstrong. She says area trails are popular with dirt bikers and ATVers.
It's very obvious that most of them are run over or stepped on. It's not predation and it's not age. We have been going there for years and flicking the dead snakes off of the trail. So we've been sadly doing that for years, and it's very hard to watch when you love nature.
Scogan says a simple solution would be to block the area off by planting trees. The RM says it wants to take a thoughtful, informed approach that considers ecological protections and community use. Well, the pizza's hot at Tommy's Pizzeria on Corridon, but the patio's not. A cool start to spring means a slow start to outdoor dining. Owner Tommy Schneider says their patio season typically gets going around the end of April, but this year's weather has kept many diners eating inside. This first long weekend of the season has cooler temperatures and even some rain in the forecast.
We rely on our patio season in Winnipeg. It's very short. Our winters are really long and our business gets cut in half or even worse. So we really rely on our summer to retain enough money to get through the winter.
Schneider says bad weather can also impact how many shifts he has available for his staff. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells at your CBC News Desk. Sierra, what's going on in traffic?
Yeah, Winnipeg police have just issued a traffic advisory. There's a road closure. McGregor Street at Church Avenue is closed in both directions due to an ongoing police investigation. So they're asking motorists to avoid the area and use alternate routes. They will be providing updates when available. As well, got a quick call from Jen. Westbound going along the Narran Bridge. They're looked to have been an accident just before Gray in the curb lane there. So you want to keep an eye out for that.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Abby.
A mix of sun and clouds, showers, breeze, snow, ice. Look out for freezing rain also. But for the May long weekend, it's still going to be more like here and there. Calmer Saturday, cooler and lighter winds, more stable conditions in the south. But by Sunday and Monday, we might see some unsettled patterns as periods of clouds and scattered showers will be coming into most of the regions with cooler temperatures province-wide. Right now, Winnipeg, we at 15, warming to 20.
Thank you very much, Abby. Have yourself a lovely weekend, everyone. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. The Current is next.